In the fog-choked Blackwater Bay, Sherlock Holmes hunts a deadly mystery. Ghost ships with vanished crews, blood-stained decks, and a shadowy figure called the Hydra. When cryptic ciphers and glowing vials reveal a smuggler's plot for a toxic weapon, Holmes and Watson face gunfire, betrayal, and a mastermind named Salazar. Racing against time, they unravel a web of mutiny and murder to stop a conspiracy that could reshape empires before the Hydra's next head strikes. Chapter 1. The Fog over Blackwater Bay. The fog hung thick over Blackwater Bay, like a heavy gray blanket smothering the world. It swallowed the horizon, blurred the edges of the docks, and muffled the usual clatter of London's waterfront. Sherlock. Holmes stood at the window of his Baker Street flat, his sharp eyes cutting through the gloom outside. The gas lamps flickered weakly, their light barely reaching the cobblestones below. It was a cold, damp evening in October, the kind that made your bones ache and your breath hang in the air. Holmes's long fingers tapped the windowsill, a restless rhythm. He hadn't spoken in over an hour, which worried me. I, Dr. John Watson, sat by the fire pretending to read the evening paper. Truth be told, I was watching him. When Holmes got this quiet, it meant his mind was racing, chasing some thread of thought I couldn't see. His lean face, half lit by the fire's glow, looked sharper than usual, his high cheekbones casting shadows that made him seem almost ghostly himself. "Watson," he said suddenly, his voice low but clear, "what do you make of the weather?" I lowered my paper, caught off guard. "The weather? It's miserable. Fog so thick you can't see 10 feet, why?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned from the window, his gray eyes glinting with something I couldn't quite place. Curiosity, maybe, or excitement. "Fog," he said almost to himself, "is a great concealer. It hides movement, muffles sound, and obscures intent. A perfect veil for secrets." I frowned, setting the paper aside. "Holmes, you're talking in riddles again. What's on your mind?" He crossed the room in 3 quick strides, his dressing gown trailing behind him like a dark wing. He picked up a telegram from the table, its edges crumpled from being read and reread. "This arrived an hour ago," he said, holding it out. "Read it." I took the paper and scanned the words written in the hurried scrawl of a telegraph operator. Sherlock Holmes, 221B Baker Street, urgent, mystery at Blackwater Bay. Ship found abandoned, crew missing, signs of violence, police baffled, come at once, Inspector Lestrade, Scotland Yard. "Abandoned ship?" I said, looking up. "Sounds like something out of a penny dreadful. The Mary Celeste all over again." Holmes's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "The Mary Celeste was found adrift in the Atlantic, Watson, with no signs of struggle. This is different. Lestrade mentions violence. That suggests foul play, not mere abandonment." He turned back to the window, his silhouette stark against the foggy glow. A ship deserted yet bearing marks of conflict, in a bay shrouded by fog. "Curious, don't you think?" I nodded, though I wasn't sure I followed. Holmes had a way of seeing puzzles where I saw only problems. "Are we going then?" I asked. "Of course," he said, already reaching for his coat. "Pack your bag, Watson. We leave for Blackwater Bay tonight." The train to Blackwater Bay rattled through the night, its whistle cutting through the fog like a mournful cry. Holmes sat across from me in the dimly lit compartment, his violin case resting on the seat beside him. He hadn't brought the instrument out, which was a small mercy. His playing could be as haunting as the fog outside. Instead, he stared out the window, though there was nothing to see but swirling gray mist. "Lestrade's out of his depth," I said, trying to fill the silence. "He wouldn't call you unless he was desperate." Holmes nodded absently. "Lestrade is competent in routine matters, but this is no ordinary case. An abandoned ship, signs of violence, and a missing crew, all under the cover of this unnatural fog. It's a stage set for something darker." I shifted uncomfortably. "You think it's murder?" "I think nothing yet," he said, his voice sharp. "Assumptions are the enemy of truth. We observe, we deduce, we conclude. In that order." I didn't argue. I'd learned long ago that Holmes's methods, strange as they seemed, worked. Still, the idea of a ship drifting empty in Blackwater Bay, its crew gone and blood left behind, sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. We arrived at Blackwater Bay just before midnight. The station was little more than a wooden platform, slick with damp and surrounded by fog so dense it seemed to press against us. A lone figure waited under a gas lamp, his overcoat pulled tight against the chill. Inspector Lestrade's familiar, face lined and tired, looked almost ghostly in the dim light. "Holmes, Watson," he said, tipping his hat. "Glad you're here. This one's a proper mess." "Tell us everything," Holmes said, his tone all business as we followed Lestrade toward the docks. The inspector led us along a narrow path, the fog muffling our footsteps. "It's the Eternal Hope," he began. "A merchant ship docked here 3 days ago to unload cargo, spices mostly from the Indies. Last night a watchman saw her lights flicker out. Thought it was odd, so he rowed out this morning to check. Found her drifting, not a soul on board. But there's blood, Holmes. Blood on the deck, in the cabins, even on the wheel. No bodies, though. Not one." Holmes's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing, his mind already working. I glanced at the dark water beyond the docks, where shapes loomed faintly in the fog. Ships, maybe, or something else. The air smelled of salt and decay, and the distant creak of wood made my skin prickle. We reached the edge of the dock where a small rowboat waited, bobbing in the black water. A grizzled man with a lantern stood beside it, his face weathered, like old leather. "This is Amos," Lestrade said, "the watchman who found her." Amos nodded, his eyes wary. "Ain't right what I saw," he muttered. "Blood everywhere but no men, like they vanished into the fog." Holmes crouched beside the boat, inspecting it as if it held some secret. "Did you touch anything on the ship?" he asked. Amos shook his head. "Didn't dare. Rowed back fast as I could and called the police." "Good," Holmes said, standing. "Take us to the ship." The rowboat cut through the water, the fog parting just enough to show the Eternal Hope ahead. She was a 3-masted schooner, her sails furled and her hull dark against the misty night. As we drew closer, I saw her name painted in faded letters on the bow. The ship seemed to lean slightly, as if weighed down by something unseen. We climbed, aboard, the deck creaking under our feet. The air felt heavy, charged with a silence that pressed against my ears. Lestrade's lantern cast long shadows, and I noticed Holmes scanning the deck, his eyes darting from plank to plank. He knelt suddenly, touching a dark stain near the railing. "Blood," he said, rubbing his fingers together. "Fresh, no more than a day old." I swallowed hard, my stomach turning. The stain was wide, smeared, as if something, or someone, had been dragged. Holmes moved on, his coat sweeping the deck as he examined every inch. He paused at a coil of rope, then at a broken lantern, its glass scattered like tiny stars. "Notice the pattern, Watson," he said, pointing to the deck. "The blood trails lead toward the cabins, but none go over the side. If the crew were thrown overboard, we'd see splashes, disturbances in the water's edge. There are none." I nodded, though I wasn't sure what he meant. "So they didn't go into the water?" "Not willingly," he said, his voice low. "Come." We followed him below deck, the air growing colder and damper with each step. The ship's interior was a maze of narrow passages, the walls stained with salt and time. Lestrade's lantern barely lit the way, and I kept close, my hand brushing the revolver in my coat pocket. I'd seen enough of Holmes's cases to know danger could lurk in shadows like these. The crew's quarters were a wreck. Bunks were overturned. Blankets torn and more blood stained the floor, great splashes of it like a painter's careless strokes. Holmes moved like a bloodhound, sniffing out clues. He picked up a torn piece of paper from the floor, holding it to the light. It was a scrap of a letter, the ink smudged but readable. "Must not let them find." "Find what?" I asked. Holmes tucked the paper into his pocket. "That, Watson," is the question. We moved to the captain's cabin, where the chaos was worse. The desk was smashed, papers scattered, and a brass compass lay broken on the floor. Blood streaked the walls, and a single chair stood upright in the center, as if waiting for someone. Holmes circled it, his eyes narrowing. "Lestrade," he said, "was the ship searched thoroughly?" "As best we could," the inspector replied. "But the fog makes it hard and the men are spooked. Talk of ghosts, curses, rubbish, but it's slowing us down." Holmes snorted. "Ghosts do not leave bloodstains, Lestrade. Men do." He knelt by the desk, running his fingers along a seam in the wood. With a soft click, a hidden drawer sprang open, revealing a small leather book. Holmes flipped through it, his eyes scanning the pages. "The captain's log," he said, "or part of it. The last entry is dated 3 days ago." "What does it say?" I asked, leaning closer. Holmes read aloud. "October 15th. Strange lights in the fog. Crew restless. Heard whispers at night. Not from our men. Must protect the cargo at all costs." "Cargo?" Lestrade said, frowning. "It was just spices, wasn't it?" Holmes closed the book, his expression unreadable. "So it seems. But spices don't bleed, and they don't make men vanish. We searched the rest of the ship, but found no bodies, no weapons, only more questions. The hold was filled with crates of spices, cinnamon, cloves, saffron, but nothing unusual. Yet Holmes lingered there, tapping the crates, listening to the hollow sounds. "Something's off," he muttered. "The weight, the arrangement. I'll need to examine these further." By the time we returned to the dock, dawn was breaking, though the fog barely thinned. Lestrade looked exhausted, his face gray in the early light. "What now, Holmes?" he asked. "Now," Holmes said, "we return to London. I need my files, my maps, and a clear head. This ship holds secrets, but they won't be found in the dark." As we rowed back, the eternal hope faded into the fog, a ghostly shape that seemed to watch us go. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that the answers Holmes sought were hidden not just in the ship, but in the fog itself. Back at Baker Street, Holmes spread maps and papers across the floor, his pipe sending clouds of smoke into the air. I sat by, trying to make sense of it all, but my mind kept drifting to that blood-streaked deck, the empty ship, the whispers in the captain's log. Holmes worked late into the night, muttering about tides, shipping routes, and something called the Blackwater Current. "Watson," he said at last, looking up from his papers, "this is no ordinary crime. The fog, the ship, the missing crew, it's a puzzle with pieces scattered across the bay. Tomorrow we return, and I suspect we'll find more than blood." Nodded, though my heart was heavy. I'd seen Holmes unravel mysteries before, but this one felt different, darker, deeper, as if the fog itself held the truth, and it wasn't ready to let go. Chapter 2. A telegram from the coast. The fog clung to London like a damp shroud as I woke in our Baker Street flat, the air heavy with the smell of coal smoke and wet stone. It was early, the kind of gray morning where the world felt half asleep. Sherlock Holmes was already up, his lean figure bent over a table littered with maps, shipping logs, and a pile of tobacco ash that looked like it had been there all night. His violin sat untouched in its case, a sure sign his mind was elsewhere. I rubbed sleep from my eyes, poured a cup of tea, and tried to shake the chill from our trip to Blackwater Bay the night before. The eternal hope, with its blood-streaked deck and missing crew, lingered in my thoughts like a bad dream. Mrs. Hudson's knock broke the quiet. She stood in the doorway, her face pale, holding a telegram. "Mr. Holmes," she said, her voice tight. "This came just now. The boy said it's urgent." Holmes snatched the paper, his eyes scanning it in a flash. "Watson," he said, his voice sharp with that familiar spark of excitement, "listen to this." He read aloud. "Sherlock Holmes 221B, second ship found empty at Blackwater, more blood, no crew. Fishermen report strange lights. Come immediately. Lestrade." I set my cup down, my heart sinking. "Another ship? That's no accident." Holmes tossed the telegram onto the table. his lips curling slightly. Accidents are for those who don't look closely, Watson. This is deliberate. He was already pulling on his coat, his movements quick and precise, like a man gearing up for a hunt. Pack your bag. We're heading back to the coast. Hesitated, the memory of the Eternal Hope's eerie silence still fresh. Holmes, 2 ships, no crews, blood everywhere. It's not normal. What are we dealing with? He paused at the door, his gray eyes meeting mine. Normal or not, it's human, and humans leave clues no matter how clever they think they are. He tapped his temple. We'll find them. The train to Blackwater Bay rattled through the countryside, the fog outside so thick it seemed to press against the windows. Holmes sat across from me in our compartment, his fingers steepled, his gaze lost in thought. I tried to read the morning paper, but my mind kept drifting to Lestrade's words. Strange lights. They sounded like something from a sailor's ghost story, the kind told in smoky taverns, but the blood we'd seen was real enough to make my skin crawl. Holmes, I said, breaking the silence, what do you think those lights are? The fisherman's report, it's odd. He didn't look up. Lights in fog can be many things, lanterns, reflections, or tricks of the mind. But fishermen aren't fools. They know the sea. If they saw lights, there's a source, and I'll find it. His confidence was reassuring, but it didn't ease the knot in my stomach. I'd seen Holmes unravel mysteries before, but this one felt darker, like the fog itself was hiding something alive and watching. We reached Blackwater Bay by noon. The station was a damp, creaky platform, the air thick with salt and the faint rot of seaweed. Inspector Lestrade waited under a flickering gas lamp, his face grimmer than last night. Beside him stood a wiry man in a patched fisherman's coat, his hands rough from years at sea, his eyes darting nervously. "This is Caleb," Lestrade said, nodding to the man. He saw the lights. Caleb shuffled his feet, his voice low and rough. 2 nights back out by the bay, greenish glow, moving slow like it was skimming the water. Thought it was a ship's lantern at first, but it weren't. Too small, too quick. Then it vanished. Holmes's eyes narrowed, his mind already working. Where exactly? Caleb pointed toward the horizon, lost in the fog. Near the old wreck, a mile out. Bad currents there. No one sails close. Holmes nodded, storing the detail. Take us to the ship, he told Lestrade. The Star of Dover was moored near a crumbling pier, half hidden by the fog. It was a smaller vessel than the Eternal Hope, built for quick runs, its deck cluttered with barrels and tangled ropes. As we climbed aboard, the same chilling scene greeted us, bloodstains smeared and splattered trailing from the deck to the cabins below. No bodies, no crew, just the creak of wood and the slap of water against the hull. Holmes moved like a bloodhound, his eyes darting over every inch of the deck. He knelt by a bloodstain near the helm, touching it with his fingertips. Older than the Eternal Hopes, he said. 2 days, maybe 3. The blood's darker, drier. I glanced at Lestrade, who looked as confused as I felt. How can you tell? I asked. The color, Holmes said, as if it were the simplest thing. Fresh blood is bright red. Old blood turns brown. This crime happened first. He stood, brushing his hands. The Star of Dover was abandoned before the Eternal Hope, yet found later. Why? Lestrade shrugged, his coat damp from the mist. No one saw her till this morning. She was tucked behind the pier, out of sight. Holmes's lips pressed into a thin line. Out of sight, yet so close to shore. Convenient. We descended to the cabins, the air growing colder and heavier with each step. The narrow passages were a mess, bunks overturned, blankets torn, blood splashed across the walls, like a madman's painting. Holmes found a scrap of paper under a broken chair, holding it to Lestrade's lantern. It bore a single word, scrawled in haste. Cargo. He showed it to us, his face unreadable. Cargo again, he said. Both ships' manifests list spices, cloth, nothing valuable enough for this. He turned to Caleb, who'd followed us, hovering near the door. You said smugglers use these waters, how? Caleb scratched his beard, uneasy. They hide stuff in plain sight, false crates, secret compartments. Use signals to avoid patrols. Colored lanterns, mostly. Holmes pocketed the paper. And the lights you saw, could they be smuggler signals? Caleb nodded slowly. Could be. Green light's rare, though. Not a usual signal. Holmes's eyes gleamed. Then we'll see these lights ourselves. Tonight. Lestrade sputtered. Holmes, in this fog? The currents are deadly, and the men are scared stiff. They're talking ghosts, curses. Ghosts don't bleed, Holmes snapped. Watson, and I will go. Caleb, you'll row. I swallowed hard, not thrilled at the idea of chasing ghost lights in a fog-choked bay, but Holmes's mind was set, and I'd learned long ago that arguing was pointless. That night we set out in a small rowboat, just the three of us, Holmes, Caleb, and me. The fog was thicker than ever, curling around us like smoke, muffling the splash of oars. Caleb rowed, his face tense, while Holmes sat at the bow holding a lantern that barely pierced the gloom. I gripped my revolver, though I wasn't sure what good it would do against lights. Head for the wreck, Holmes said, his voice low. That's where the lights were. Caleb steered us through the black water, the air so cold it stung my face. The bay was silent, save for the creak of the oars and the distant lap of waves. My heart pounded, the fog making every shadow feel alive. Then I saw it, a faint green glow, flickering in the distance like a will-o'-the-wisp. It moved slowly, almost dancing on the water. Holmes, I whispered, pointing. There. He leaned forward, his eyes locked on the light. Closer, Caleb. Steady. We rowed nearer, the glow growing brighter, then dimming, as if playing hide-and-seek. It wasn't a ship, too small, too quick. Holmes raised his lantern, flashing it twice. The green light froze, then vanished into the fog. Blast, Caleb muttered. It's gone. Holmes didn't answer, his gaze fixed on the water. Not gone, he said at last. Hidden. Someone knows we're here. We rowed back in silence, the fog pressing closer as if it had eyes. Back at the dock, Holmes was quiet, his mind racing. Those lights are signals, he said finally. And signals mean a plan. Someone's orchestrating this, Watson. What now? I asked, my voice hoarse from the cold. Now we dig deeper, he said. The Star of Dover, the eternal hope, the lights, they're pieces of a puzzle. Tomorrow we search the wrecks and the bay's records. Smugglers, Watson. Smugglers and secrets. As we walked back to our lodgings, the fog seemed to follow, curling around us like a living thing. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that the answers Holmes sought were out there in the dark, waiting to be found or to find us. Chapter 3. The tale of the vanished crew dawn broke over Blackwater Bay, but the fog refused to lift, casting a gray veil over the docks. The air was damp, heavy with the smell of salt and rotting wood. Sherlock Holmes and I had barely slept, the eerie green lights from last night's boat trip still flickering in my mind. Holmes, as usual, seemed untouched by fatigue, his sharp eyes scanning the horizon as we stood on the pier. His coat flapped in the cold wind, and his face was set, like a hound catching a scent. Watson, he said, not looking at me. The key to this mystery lies not just in the ships, but in the men who sailed them. Crews don't vanish without reason. We need their story. I nodded, though the thought of more blood-streaked decks made my stomach turn. Where do we start? The ships are empty and no one's seen the crews. Holmes turned, his gaze piercing. We start with those. Who knew them? Sailors talk, Watson. They drink, they boast, they gossip. Someone in this town knows something. We headed to the Rusty Anchor, a weathered tavern near the docks where sailors gathered. The place was dim, its air thick with tobacco smoke and the sour tang of ale. Rough men hunched over tables, their voices low, their eyes wary as we entered. Inspector Lestrade was already there, looking out of place in his city coat, nursing a mug of something dark. Holmes, he said, standing. I've rounded up a few locals who knew the crews. They're nervous, but they'll talk. He led us to a corner table where 3 men sat, their faces lined from years at sea. One was broad, with a scarred cheek. Another was thin, his fingers twitching around a glass. The third was older, his beard white, his eyes sunken like he'd seen too much. Holmes sat across from them, his presence commanding despite his calm tone. "Gentlemen," he said, "tell me about the crews of the Eternal Hope and the Star of Dover. Who were they? What did they say before they vanished?" The broad man, introduced as Tom, spoke first, his voice gruff. "The Hope's crew was a mixed lot. Captain Harrow led 'em, tough as nails but fair. They'd been running spices from the Indies for years. Last I saw 'em, they were drinking here, talking about a big haul. Seemed jumpy, though, kept looking over their shoulders." Holmes leaned forward. "Jumpy? Why?" Tom shrugged. "Dunno. Said something about strange noises at night, whispers like voices on the water. Thought it was the drink talking." The thin man Ned cut in, his voice shaky. "The Star of Dover was worse. Their mate Jem was in here a week ago bragging about a secret cargo. Said it'd make 'em rich. Next day they're gone. Ship's empty, blood all over. Ain't right." Holmes's eyes narrowed. "Secret cargo? Did he say what it was?" Ned shook his head. "Just hinted, said it was worth more than spices, kept patting his coat like he had something hidden." The old man, Silas, spoke last, his voice barely above a whisper. "I sailed these waters 50 years. Seen things, lights, shadows, ships that shouldn't be. The bay's cursed, Mr. Holmes. Those crews didn't just vanish. Something took, Lestrade snorted. "Curses? Come now, Silas, we're dealing with murder, not fairy tales." Holmes raised a hand, silencing him. "Let him speak. Silas, what do you mean by something?" Silas leaned closer, his eyes glinting. "Old stories. Ships disappearing, crews gone without a trace. They say the fog hides things that ain't human. I saw lights once, years back, green and cold. Never forgot 'em. I felt a chill remembering the glow we'd chased last night." Holmes, though, looked unmoved. "Stories are useful," he said, "but facts are better. Did any of you see the crews leave? Any strangers in town?" Tom shook his head. "No strangers. Just the usual dock rats. But the Hope's crew mentioned a man in a dark coat, watching him from the pier. Didn't like him." Holmes filed that away, his fingers tapping the table. "Thank you, gentlemen. Watson, Lestrade, we're done here." Outside, the fog seemed thicker, curling around the tavern like a living thing. Lestrade looked frustrated. "Holmes, what was that about? Curses and whispers? We're wasting time." Holmes's lips twitched. "Time is never wasted when you—" "Listen, Lestrade. Fear makes men talk, and talk reveals truth. The crews were scared, hiding something, likely this secret cargo, and the man in the dark coat is a lid." "Where to now?" I asked, pulling my coat tighter against the damp. "The harbor master's office," Holmes said. "Crew lists, cargo manifests, docking records. If there's a pattern, it's there." The harbor master's office was a squat building by the docks, its windows fogged with condensation. The harbor master, a stout man named Grayson, was reluctant at first, muttering about privacy, but Lestrade's badge changed his tune. He handed over the records, his hands shaking slightly. Holmes pored over the papers, his eyes darting across names and dates. "The Eternal Hope had a crew of 12, he said. The Star of Dover, 10. Both docked within days of each other, both carrying spices from the same port in the Indies. Yet their manifests are oddly vague. Assorted goods listed alongside the spices." I frowned. "That's not unusual, is it? Ships carry mixed cargo." Holmes shook his head. "Not when every crate is accounted for by weight and value. These manifests are sloppy, as if hiding something. And look here." He pointed to a name on the Star of Dover's crew list. "Jem Walsh, first mate. He's listed on both ships, but with different signatures." Lestrade leaned over. "A clerical error? Or a deliberate one?" Holmes said. "Someone wanted Jem Walsh's name tied to both ships." "Why?" "We spent hours combing through records but found no clear answers. The crews were experienced, the ships unremarkable, yet both had vanished under the same strange circumstances." Holmes pocketed a copy of the manifests, his face unreadable. As we left the office, the fog seemed to press closer, the docks quiet, except for the creak of moored ships. Holmes stopped suddenly, his head tilting. "Listen, Watson." I strained my ears. At first, nothing, just the lap of water. Then, faint and eerie, a low hum, like a voice carried on the wind. It stopped, as quickly as it started. "What was that?" I whispered. Holmes's eyes gleamed. "The bay is talking, Watson. We just need to learn its language." That evening, we returned to the docks, determined to find more clues. Holmes insisted on inspecting the Star of Dover again, this time focusing on the cargo hold. The crates were stacked neatly, labeled as spices, but Holmes tapped each one, listening. "Hollow," he said, pausing at one. "This one's different." He pried it open, revealing not spices but straw, and beneath it a small locked box. Holmes examined it, his fingers tracing the lock. Iron, well made, not standard for cargo. Whatever's inside, they wanted it hidden. Lestrade frowned. "Smugglers?" "Perhaps," Holmes said, "but smugglers don't abandon their goods. Something scared them off, or someone." We took the box back to our lodgings, a small inn near the docks. Holmes worked late, trying to pick the lock, while I sat by, my mind racing with questions. The crews, the blood, the lights, the box. What tied them together? And who was the man in the dark coat? As midnight struck, Holmes looked up, his face lit by the lamp. "Watson, this is no simple crime. The crews knew something worth killing for. Tomorrow we find the man in the dark coat. He's the key." I nodded, though the hum we'd heard on the docks echoed in my mind. The fog outside seemed alive, hiding secrets we were only beginning to uncover. I couldn't shake the feeling that Blackwater Bay was watching us, waiting for our next move. Chapter 4. Footprints on the docks. The fog over Blackwater Bay hung as thick as ever, a gray curtain that dulled the morning light and made every shadow suspicious. I woke in our cramped inn room, the air damp and heavy with the scent of salt. Sherlock Holmes was already up, standing by the window, his silhouette sharp against the misty glow. The locked box from the Star of Dover sat on the table, its iron surface glinting like a challenge. Holmes hadn't opened it yet, but I knew he wouldn't rest until he did. "Watson," he said, not turning, "today we hunt for the man in the dark coat. He's our link to the crew's disappearance." I rubbed my eyes, still groggy from a restless night filled with dreams of green lights and blood-streaked decks. "How do we find him?" The dock worker's description was vague. A dark coat, a hat, could be anyone. Holmes turned, his gray eyes sharp. "Not anyone, Watson. A man who watches sailors, who lingers where he shouldn't, leaves traces." We started at the docks. We ate a quick breakfast of stale bread and tea, then headed out. The town was waking slowly, fishermen hauling nets, dock workers shouting over the creak of cranes. The fog muffled their voices, making the world feel small and secretive. Inspector Lestrade met us at the pier, his face lined with exhaustion. "Holmes, I hope you've got something. My men are jumpy and the townsfolk are whispering about ghosts again." Holmes ignored the ghost talk, his focus on the ground. "Show me where the Star of Dover was first spotted." Lestrade led us to a quiet stretch of the dock hidden behind a stack of crates and a rusted anchor. The Star of Dover loomed nearby, its hull dark against the fog. Holmes crouched, his fingers brushing the damp planks. "Footprints," he said, pointing to faint marks in the mud. "Fresh, no more than a day old. Heavy boots, deep tread. Someone stood here for a long time." I squinted, barely able to see the marks. "How can you tell they were watching the ship?" Holmes traced the outline of a boot. "The toes point toward the water and the heels are dug in, as if the man stood still observing. Notice the overlap, multiple prints in the same spot. Patience, Watson. Our man was waiting." Lestrade frowned. "Could be a dock worker or a curious local." Holmes stood, brushing his hands. "A dock worker moves with purpose, not lingering, and a local wouldn't stand in the mud at night, in fog this thick, unless they had reason. No, this is our man in the dark coat." We followed the footprints along the dock, Holmes moving like a tracker in the wild. The prints led to a narrow, alley between warehouses where the smell of tar and fish was strong. The trail stopped at a pile of crates, but Holmes didn't pause. He climbed over them, his coat catching on a splintered edge, and dropped to the other side. I scrambled after him, Lestrade grumbling behind. On the ground, half hidden by a barrel, was a cigarette butt, its end still damp. Holmes picked it up, sniffing it. Cheap tobacco, foreign blend. Not common here. Our man smokes, and he's not local. I glanced around, the alley feeling tighter in the fog. He could be anywhere by now. Holmes pocketed the cigarette. He's close, Watson. Men like him don't stray far from their purpose. We spent the morning canvassing the docks, asking dock workers and fishermen about a man in a dark coat. Most shook their heads, but a young lad, barely 16, piped up. Saw someone like that, he said, wiping his hands on his apron. 2 nights back, near the old pier. Tall, hat pulled low, standing by the water. Thought he was waiting for a boat. Holmes' eyes lit up. Did he speak? Any accent? The boy shrugged. Didn't hear him. He just stood there, smoking. Then he was gone. Holmes thanked the boy with a coin and turned to us. The old pier, Lestrade, that's our next stop. The old pier was a crumbling relic, its boards warped and slick with moss. The fog was so thick I could barely see 10 feet ahead, and the water below lapped ominously. Holmes moved carefully, scanning the ground. More footprints, he said, pointing to faint marks leading to the pier's edge. Same boots. He was here, and recently. I gripped my revolver, the air feeling heavier, as if the fog itself was watching. What was he doing out here? Holmes knelt, examining a splintered board. Meeting someone, perhaps. Or signaling. He pointed to a scorch mark, barely visible. A lantern was set here briefly. The burn is fresh. Lestrade scratched his head. Signaling, like those green lights? Exactly, Holmes said. Our man is connected to the lights, the ships, and likely the missing crews. We need to find where he went. The trail led us back to the town, where we questioned more locals. A barmaid at the Rusty Anchor remembered a stranger in a dark coat, drinking alone 2 nights ago. Kept to himself, she said. Paid in foreign coins, Spanish, I think. Left when the sailors started singing. Holmes's face tightened. Spanish coins. Interesting. He thanked her and led us outside, his pace quickening. Watson Lestrade, our man is no ordinary vagrant. He's involved in something bigger. Smuggling, perhaps, or worse. We returned to the inn, where Holmes spread out his maps and notes, the locked box still unopened on the table. He worked in silence, cross-referencing the crew lists and manifests, his pipe sending clouds of smoke into the air. I watched, my mind racing with questions. Who was this man? What did he want with the ships? And what was in that box? As evening fell, Holmes looked up, his eyes gleaming. The footprints, the cigarette, the coins, they point to a foreigner, likely a sailor or smuggler operating in Blackwater Bay. The crews knew something, Watson. Something worth dying for. Tonight we stake out the old pier. If our man returns, we'll have him. The night was cold, the fog thicker than ever. We crouched behind crates at the old pier, the silence broken only by the water's gentle slap. Holmes was still as a statue, his eyes fixed on the darkness. I clutched my revolver, my heart pounding. Hours passed and I was starting to think. We'd wasted our time when a faint crunch of boots broke the quiet. Holmes tensed, his hand signaling me to stay low. A figure emerged from the fog, tall in a dark coat, hat pulled low. He stopped at the pier's edge, lighting a cigarette. The match flared, showing a sharp face, weathered and foreign-looking. He raised a lantern, its light green, and flashed it twice toward the bay. Holmes moved like a cat, silent and swift. But the man heard something. He dropped the lantern and bolted, vanishing into the fog. Holmes gave chase, with Lestrade and me close behind. The alleys twisted, the fog swallowing sound, but we lost him in the maze of warehouses. Back at the pier, Holmes picked up the fallen lantern, its green glass cracked but intact. Our man is careful, he said, but not careful enough. This lantern ties him to the lights. We're getting closer, Watson. As we trudged back to the inn, the fog seemed to mock us, hiding answers just out of reach. The man in the dark coat was real, not a ghost, but he was a shadow in a town full of shadows. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching us, waiting for his next move. Holmes, though, was undeterred, his mind already racing toward the next clue. Tomorrow, he said, we open that box and we find out what the crew's died for. Chapter 5. The harbor master's secret. The fog over Blackwater Bay seemed to thicken with each passing day, a gray wall that swallowed sound and sight. I woke to the distant cry of gulls, their calls muffled by the damp air. Sherlock Holmes was already at work in our inn room, the locked box from the Star of Dover sitting on the table like a silent challenge. His tools, a small pick, a thin blade, and a magnifying glass, were spread out beside it, but the box remained unopened. His face, lit by the weak morning light, was taut with focus, his fingers moving with the precision of a surgeon. "Watson," he said, not looking up. "The man in the dark coat is a piece of the puzzle, but the harbor master, Grayson, is another. His hands shook when he gave us the records yesterday. Fear, not cold. He knows more than he's saying." I pulled on my coat, the memory of last night's chase through the foggy alleys still sharp. The green lantern, the fleeting glimpse of that weathered face. It all felt like chasing a ghost. "Grayson?" He seemed nervous, but I thought it was just Lestrade's badge. Holmes set down his pick, his eyes narrowing. "Nervous men hide secrets, Watson. And secrets in a port town mean power, or danger. We'll pay him another visit." We found Inspector Lestrade waiting outside the inn, his face drawn from lack of sleep. The town was buzzing with rumors now, whispers of cursed ships and vanishing crews spreading like wildfire. Lestrade rubbed his temples. "Holmes, the men are losing their nerve. 2 ships, no crews, and now that green light business. They're saying the bay's haunted." Holmes's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "Fear clouds judgment, Lestrade. Let them talk of ghosts, it keeps them out of our way. Come, we're going to the harbor master's office." The harbor master's office was as damp and dreary as the day before, its walls stained with salt and time. Grayson was there, hunched over a ledger, his face pale when he saw us. "Mr. Holmes," he stammered, standing. "Didn't expect you. Back so soon." Holmes fixed him with a stare that could cut glass. "Yet here we are, Mr. Grayson. I have questions about the Eternal Hope and the Star of Dover. Their records are incomplete, and you were quick to hand them over. Too quick." Grayson's hands fidgeted, his eyes darting to the door. "I gave you everything I had. Just spices, cloth, normal cargo. Nothing strange." Holmes stepped closer, his voice low. "Nothing strange? 2 crews vanish, blood stains the decks, and you, the man who oversees every ship in this port, notice nothing? I find that hard to believe." I watched Grayson's face, seeing the sweat bead on his brow despite the chill. Lestrade shifted, his hand resting on his notebook, ready to take notes. I kept mine near my revolver just in case. Grayson swallowed hard. "I'm just the harbor master. I check manifests, assign berths. I don't pry into cargoes." Holmes leaned in, his eyes never leaving Grayson's. "But you hear things, don't you? Whispers from the dock workers, tales from the sailors. Tell me about the man in the dark coat." Grayson's face went white. I don't know any man in a dark coat." "Lying is a poor choice," Holmes said, his tone sharp. "We found his footprints on your docks, his cigarette by your pier. He's been watching the ships, and you've seen him. Speak, or I'll have Lestrade search this office top to bottom." Grayson slumped in his chair, his hands trembling. "All right," he muttered. "I saw him. Tall, foreign-looking, always in that coat. He came by a week ago, asking about the Star of Dover. Wanted to know when she docked, who was on board. Paid me to keep quiet." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "Paid you how?" Grayson reached into a drawer, pulling out a small pouch. He tipped it onto the desk, and a handful of Spanish coins clinked out, their edges worn but gleaming. "These," said, "there'd be more if I kept my mouth shut." Lestrade snatched a coin, examining it. "Spanish. same as the barmaid mentioned. Holmes picked up another, turning it in the light. Old coins, but recently circulated. Our man is well-funded and careful. What else did he say, Grayson? The harbor master hesitated, then spoke in a rush. He asked about the Eternal Hope, too. Wanted to know if her cargo matched the manifest. I told him it was just spices, but he didn't believe me. Kept saying something about a delivery that had to be protected. Holmes's fingers stilled. A delivery. Did he mention what it was? Grayson shook his head. No, just said it was worth more than my life if I talked. I swear that's all I know. Holmes studied him for a long moment, then nodded. For your sake, I hope so. But we'll be watching, Grayson. If you're hiding more, I'll know. We left the office. The fog thicker outside, curling around the docks like a living thing. Lestrade was fuming. He's in on it, Holmes. Taking bribes, hiding information, we should arrest him. Not yet, Holmes said. Grayson's a small fish, scared and greedy. Arrest him, and the bigger fish swim away. We need the man, in the dark coat. Back at the inn, Holmes tackled the locked box again, his tools clicking against the iron. I watched, my mind racing with Grayson's words. Spanish coins, a mysterious delivery, 2 empty ships. What was worth all this blood? The box finally clicked open, revealing a bundle of papers and a small vial of dark liquid. Holmes unfolded the papers, his eyes scanning quickly. Letters, he said, written in code, and this. He held up the vial, sniffing it. Ink, but not ordinary. It's mixed with something, possibly for secret writing. I frowned. Secret writing? Like spies? Or smugglers, Holmes said. The code will take time to crack, but these letters are no ordinary correspondence. They're orders, Watson, and they mention a shipment due to arrive soon. Lestrade, who joined us, looked skeptical. A shipment? More spices? Holmes shook his head. Something far more valuable. The crews knew about it, and it cost them their lives. We need to find that shipment before it reaches the bay. That night, we returned to the docks, the fog, so dense it felt like walking through a dream. Holmes wanted to check the Eternal Hope again, suspecting we'd missed something. The ship was as eerie as before, its deck slick with mist, the bloodstains dark and silent. Holmes moved to the cargo hold, tapping crates until he found another hollow one. Inside was a false bottom, hiding a small ledger. He flipped through it, his face tightening. Dates, locations, and initials, he said. A record of meetings, likely with our man in the dark coat. Look, JW again. Jem Walsh, the first mate on both ships. I felt a chill. He's the link, isn't he? Holmes nodded. Jem Walsh knew too much, and someone made sure he'd never talk. As we left the ship, a faint noise echoed through the fog, a low, rhythmic tapping like a signal. Holmes froze, listening. It's coming from the water, he whispered. Stay close. We crept to the dock's edge, the tapping growing louder, then stopping. A shadow moved in the fog, too quick to follow. Holmes cursed under his breath. He's here, he said. The man in the dark coat. We searched the docks until dawn, but found only more footprints leading nowhere. The fog seemed to mock us, hiding our quarry. Back at the inn, Holmes was silent, his mind racing. Grayson's secret, the coded letters, the ledger, it's all connected, he said at last. Tomorrow we find Jem Walsh's trail. He's the key to the shipment and the murders. I nodded, but the tapping echoed in my mind, like the bay itself was warning us to stop. The fog closed in, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being hunted, not just hunting. Chapter 6. Shadows in the shipyard. The fog over Blackwater Bay clung to the morning like a stubborn ghost, its gray tendrils weaving through the shipyard's skeletal cranes and rusted hulks. I woke to the faint clanging of metal from the docks, a sound that carried an eerie weight in the damp air. Sherlock Holmes was already dressed, standing over the table in our inn room, the coded letters from the Star of Dover's locked box spread out before him. The small vial of strange ink sat beside them, catching the weak light. His face was taut, his eyes burning with the intensity of a man on the edge of a breakthrough. Watson, he said, His voice low. Jem Walsh is the thread that ties the Eternal Hope and the Star of Dover. His name appears in both crews' records and now in this ledger. We need to know who he met and where. I rubbed my face, the weight of sleepless nights pressing on me. The memory of last night's tapping in the fog, the fleeting shadow of the man in the dark coat still lingered. How do we find Walsh's trail? He's gone, Holmes. Likely dead, like the rest. Holmes folded the letters, tucking them into his coat. Dead men leave echoes, Watson. Walsh was no ordinary sailor. His role in both crews suggests he was trusted or used. We'll start at the shipyard. It's where men like him worked, planned, and whispered. Inspector Lestrade met us outside, his coat damp from the mist, his expression sour. Holmes, this case is a nightmare. The townsfolk won't shut up about curses, and my men are jumping at shadows. Got anything from that box yet? Holmes's eyes flicked to him. Patience, Lestrade. The letters are in code, but I'm close to cracking it. For now, we need the shipyard. Walsh's contacts will be there. Workers, foremen, anyone who saw him before he vanished. The shipyard was a sprawling maze of timber, iron, and half-built ships, the fog making it look like a graveyard of giants. Workers moved like phantoms, their hammers ringing dully. The air smelled of tar and salt with a faint tang of oil that stung my nose. Holmes led the way, his steps sure despite the slick ground, his eyes scanning every corner. We found the foreman, a burly man named Harris, in a cluttered shed filled with blueprints and tools. His face was red, his hands calloused, and he eyed us warily. What's this about? I've got ships to build and the fog's slowing us down. Holmes didn't waste time. Jem Walsh, first mate on the Star of Dover and the Eternal Hope. You knew him. What can you tell us? Harris stiffened, his eyes narrowing. Walsh? Good sailor, kept to himself. Worked here between voyages, fixing rigging, loading cargo. Haven't seen him in weeks. Holmes stepped closer, his voice sharp. You're lying, Harris. Your hands are clenched and you looked away when you spoke his name. Walsh was here, and you know why. Harris shifted, his jaw tight. I don't know nothing about no murders. Then, tell me about his meetings, Holmes said. He was seen with a man in a dark coat. Foreign, smoked cheap tobacco. They met here, didn't they? Harris hesitated, then sighed, his shoulders slumping. All right. Walsh came by a month ago, late at night. Met some fella in the yard near the old dry dock. Didn't see his face. Too dark, too foggy. They talked low, sounded heated. Walsh, left in a hurry, looked scared. Holmes's eyes gleamed. Where in the yard? Harris pointed toward the far end of the shipyard, where rusted hulls loomed like forgotten relics. By the dry dock. No one goes there after dark. Too many accidents. We thanked him and headed for the dry dock, the fog growing thicker as we moved deeper into the yard. The ground was uneven, littered with broken planks and coils of rope. Holmes crouched near a rusted crane, his fingers brushing the dirt. More footprints, he said. Same heavy boots as the docks. Our man, in the dark coat, was here. I glanced around, the fog making every shape look like a threat. What were they doing out here? Holmes stood, his gaze sweeping the area. Planning, Watson, or arguing. Look. He pointed to a patch of ground where the dirt was scuffed as if a struggle had happened. Nearby, half buried in the mud, was a small metal tag, the kind used to mark cargo crates. Holmes picked it up, turning it over. It bore a single word. Serpent. Serpent? I said, frowning. A ship? A code? Perhaps both, Holmes said, pocketing the tag. It's no coincidence. The ledger mentioned initials. S was one of them. We're close, Watson. Lestrade, trailing behind, looked uneasy. Close to what? This place gives me the creeps. Holmes ignored him, moving toward the dry dock. It was a massive pit, its walls stained with rust and seaweed, a broken ship's skeleton lying at the bottom. The fog clung to it, making it look like a giant's grave. Holmes climbed down a rickety ladder, his lantern casting long shadows. I followed, my heart pounding, while Lestrade stayed above, muttering about the cold. At the bottom, Holmes found more clues, a torn scrap of Cloth dark and coarse caught on a jagged metal edge. From a coat, he said, holding it up. Our man's, I'd wager. Nearby, scratched into the hull, was a crude symbol, a snake coiled around a dagger. I felt a chill. Smuggler's mark? Holmes nodded. Or a warning. This dry dock hasn't been used in years, yet someone's been here recently. Walsh and his contact met here, away from prying eyes. We climbed back up, the fog thicker now, the air heavy with the smell of decay. As we reached the top, a faint noise cut through the silence, a low rhythmic scrape like metal on wood. Holmes froze, his head tilting. It's coming from the yard, he whispered. Stay low. We crept toward the sound, moving between stacks of crates and rusted machinery. The scraping grew louder, then stopped. A shadow moved in the fog, tall and cloaked, vanishing behind a pile of timber. Holmes darted forward, but the figure was gone, leaving only a fresh cigarette butt, its foreign tobacco scent sharp in the air. Blast, Holmes muttered, picking it up. He's taunting us. Lestrade was sweating despite the cold. Who is this man, Holmes? He's everywhere, but we can't catch him. Holmes's eyes were hard. A professional, Lestrade. Someone trained to move unseen, to leave just enough to keep us chasing. But he's not perfect. He's left us the tag, the cloth, the symbol. He's part of something bigger, a network, perhaps. Back at the inn, Holmes spread out his findings, the coded letters, the metal tag, the scrap of cloth. He worked late, sketching the snake and dagger symbol, cross-referencing it with his notes. The serpent is key, he said. It's not just a name, it's a signal, a marker for the shipment the crews died for. I sat by, my mind racing. The shipyard, the dry dock, the man in the dark coat. It was all connected. But how? The fog outside seemed to press against the windows, hiding answers just out of reach. What now? I asked. Holmes looked up, his face lit by the lamp. We return to the ships tomorrow. The eternal hope holds more secrets, I'm sure of it. And we need to crack that code. The serpent is out there, Watson, and it's moving closer. As I lay in bed that night, the scraping sound echoed in my mind, like the bay itself was whispering its secrets. The fog felt alive, watching us, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking into a trap. Chapter 7. The ghost ship sighted. The fog over Blackwater Bay was relentless, a thick gray curtain that seemed to pulse with secrets. I woke to the low moan of a foghorn, its sound barely piercing the damp air. Sherlock Holmes stood by the inn's window, his silhouette sharp against the dim morning light. The table was cluttered with his notes, the coded letters, the metal tag marked serpent, and the scrap of dark cloth from the shipyard. His eyes were fixed on the bay, where shapes loomed faintly, like ghosts waiting to be named. Watson, he said, his voice steady but urgent, the serpent is more than a symbol. It's a ship, a cargo, or both. And it's here, in Blackwater Bay. We need to find it before it vanishes like the others. I pulled on my coat, the weight of our findings pressing on me. The snake and dagger mark, the man in the dark coat, the coded letters, they all pointed to something bigger, something worth killing for. How do we find a ship in this fog? I asked. We could barely see 10 feet last night. Holmes turned, his gray eyes glinting. We don't need to see it, Watson. We need to hear it, track it, deduce its path. The bay is alive with clues, signals, sounds, the traces men leave behind. Inspector Lestrade joined us downstairs, his face haggard from sleepless nights. Holmes, the men are on edge. Another fisherman reported lights last night. Green, same as before. The town's saying it's a ghost ship now, come to claim more souls. Holmes snorted, adjusting his scarf. Ghost ships don't leave footprints. Or cigarette butts, Lestrade. This is human work and we're close to its heart. Take us to the fisherman who saw the lights. We found the fisherman, a wiry old man named Eli, at the docks, mending nets with trembling hands. His eyes were wide, his voice low as he spoke. Saw it near midnight out by the reef. Green glow, moving slow like it was searching. Weren't no ship, I know. Too quiet, too strange. Holmes leaned forward. Describe it. Shape, size, anything. Eli shook his head. Couldn't see clear, not in this fog. Just the light, bobbing like a lantern on the water. Then it was gone like it sank. Holmes nodded, his mind racing. The reef, you say? Near the old wreck? Aye, Eli said. Same spot Caleb mentioned. Bad waters that. Currents'll pull you under. Holmes thanked him and turned to us. The reef again. That's no coincidence. We need a boat, Lestrade. Tonight we hunt for this ghost ship. Lestrade protested, his voice rising. Holmes, it's madness, the currents, the fog, you'll get yourselves killed. Holmes's eyes were hard. Then stay ashore, Lestrade. Watson and I have work to do. I wasn't thrilled about another night on the water, but Holmes's determination was infectious. By dusk we were back at the docks, joined by Caleb, the fisherman who'd rowed us before. He looked nervous, his hands gripping the oars tightly as we pushed off into the bay. The fog was thicker than ever, the water black and still, reflecting nothing but the faint glow of our lantern. Holmes sat at the bow, his lantern dimmed to avoid detection. Keep to the reef, Caleb, he said. That's where the lights appear, and listen, sound carries in fog. We rowed in silence, the only sounds the splash of oars and the occasional creak of the boat. My heart thudded, my hand resting on my revolver. The memory of the green light flickering and elusive made my skin prickle. The bay felt alive, its fog curling around us like a predator. An hour passed, then two. My arms ached from the cold, and I was starting to think we'd find nothing when Caleb hissed, "There!" He pointed to starboard, where a faint green glow pulsed in the fog, low and steady like a heartbeat. Holmes leaned forward, his eyes locked on it. Closer, but slowly. Don't scare it off. Caleb rowed carefully, the glow growing brighter, then dimming as if aware of us. It wasn't a ship. Not yet. It was too small, too quick, like a lantern floating on its own. As we neared the reef, the outline of a vessel emerged. Sleek, low, and dark, its sails furled. No crew was visible, no lights except the green glow at its bow. The Serpent, Holmes whispered, his voice taut with excitement. Mark its position, Watson, we've found it. I scribbled the coordinates on a scrap of paper, my hands shaking from cold and nerves. The ship was real, no ghost, but its silence was unnerving. No creak of wood, no voices, just that eerie light. Holmes raised his lantern, flashing it once. The green glow stopped, then flared brighter as if answering. For a moment I thought we'd signaled a friend. Then a sharp crack echoed across the water, a gunshot. The bullet splashed near our boat and Caleb cursed, rowing hard to pull us back. Down! Holmes snapped, yanking me low. Another shot rang out, missing us by inches. The green light vanished, and the ship melted into the fog, as if it had never been. We rowed back to shore, my heart pounding, the fog swallowing the sound of our retreat. Back at the docks, Lestrade was waiting, his face pale. What happened? I heard shots. Holmes climbed out, his expression grim but focused. We found the Serpent, Lestrade, a real ship, not a ghost. Someone on board didn't want us closer. I caught my breath, the cold air stinging my lungs. They shot at us, Holmes. They're protecting something. Indeed, he said, his eyes scanning the bay. And that something is worth killing. For the Serpent is the key, its cargo, its crew, its purpose. We need to know where it's docking. Back at the inn, Holmes spread out his maps, marking the reef's coordinates. He studied the coded letters again, his fingers tracing the strange ink. The code is nautical, he said. Bearings, times, signals. The Serpent is part of a schedule, Watson. A delivery, just as Grayson said. Lestrade paced, frustrated. But where is it? We can't chase shadows in this fog forever. Holmes's lips twitched. Shadows leave traces, Lestrade. The Serpent is hiding, but it can't stay hidden. Tomorrow we check the bay's currents and tides. That ship has to dock somewhere, and we'll find it. As we settled for the night, the fog pressed against the windows, the bay's silence, louder than ever. The serpent was out there, real and deadly, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching us, waiting for us to make the next move. Holmes, though, was undeterred, his mind already charting the path ahead. Chapter 8. Aboard the Mary Celeste II. The fog over Blackwater Bay clung to the morning like a shroud, its gray fingers wrapping around the docks and muffling the world. I woke to the faint creak of ships and the distant cry of gulls, my mind heavy, with the memory of last night's chase, the serpent, its green light, and the gunfire that drove us back. Sherlock Holmes was already up, standing by the inn's window, his sharp eyes scanning the bay. On the table lay his maps, the coded letters, and the metal tag marked Serpent, each a piece of the puzzle he was determined to solve. "Watson," he said, his voice low and urgent, "the Serpent is no phantom, but it's slippery. We need to understand its purpose. Today we board the Mary Celeste II, the Eternal Hope's sister ship docked nearby. If the Serpent is tied to the vanishings, the Mary Celeste II may hold clues." I pulled on my coat, the chill of the fog seeping into my bones. "Another ship? Holmes, we barely escaped the last one. What makes you think this one's safer?" His lips twitched, not quite a smile. "Safety is an illusion, Watson. But knowledge is power. The Mary Celeste II was in the same trade route as the Eternal Hope. Its crew may know something or be hiding something. Inspector Lestrade met us at the docks, his face etched with worry. The town was alive with whispers now, tales of the Serpent as a ghost ship spreading fear among the sailors. "Holmes," he said, "my men are refusing to board any more ships. They're saying the bay's cursed after those shots last night." Holmes's eyes narrowed. "Curses are for those who lack evidence, Lestrade. The Mary Celeste II is our next step. Get us a boat." The Mary Celeste II was moored a half-mile out, its masts piercing the fog like skeletal fingers. Caleb, our fisherman guide, rowed us through the black water, his face tense. The fog was so thick I could barely see the oars, and the silence felt heavy, broken only by the slap of waves against the boat. My hand rested on my revolver, the memory of gunfire making me jumpy. As we reached the ship, its hull loomed dark and silent, its name painted in faded letters. Unlike the Eternal Hope and Star of Dover, this ship wasn't abandoned. Lanterns glowed faintly, and the creak of boots on deck told us a crew was aboard. We climbed up, greeted by a wary sailor with a scarred face. "Who are you?" he growled, his hand on a knife at his belt. Holmes stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Sherlock Holmes, consulting detective. This is Dr. Watson and Inspector Lestrade. We're investigating the Eternal Hope and Star of Dover. We need to speak to your captain." The sailor hesitated, then led us to the captain's cabin. "Captain." Thorne was a short, broad man with a gray beard and eyes like chipped flint. He stood behind a cluttered desk, maps and charts scattered across it. "Holmes," he said, his voice gruff. "Heard of you. What do you want with my ship?" Holmes didn't sit, his gaze sweeping the room. "Your ship sailed the same route as the Eternal Hope. Its crew vanished, as did the Star of Dover's. You know something, Captain. Don't waste my time." Thorne's jaw tightened. "I run a clean ship, spices, cloth, nothing more. My crew's all here accounted for." Holmes leaned forward, his eyes piercing. "Yet you know Jem Walsh, don't you? First mate on both lost ships. He was seen here in this port, meeting a man in a dark coat. What did he tell you?" Thorne's face paled, but he held firm. "Walsh was a sailor like any other. Came by a month ago asking about cargo space. Said he had a big job coming. I told him we were full." "Lying," Holmes said sharply. Your eyes shifted and your hand gripped the desk. "Walsh told you more and you're scared. Speak or I'll have Lestrade tear this ship apart." Thorne glanced at Lestrade, then sighed. "All right, Walsh was nervous, said he was handling something special. Not spices, something valuable. Didn't say what, but he mentioned a ship called the Serpent. Said it was coming soon and he needed to be ready." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "The Serpent, did he say where it would dock?" Thorne shook his head. "No, just said it was dangerous, and he wanted out. Next I heard he was gone, and the Star of Dover was empty." We searched the ship, Holmes moving like a bloodhound. The crew watched us warily, their hands never far from their knives. In the cargo hold we found crates of spices, but one caught Holmes's eye. Its wood newer, its nails too clean. He pried it open, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was a small notebook, its pages filled with numbers and symbols. A cipher, Holmes said, flipping through it. Similar to the letters from the Star of Dover, dates, coordinates, and the word serpent again. This is no coincidence, Watson. I frowned, my heart racing. Another code? What's it for? Holmes pocketed the notebook. Instructions, likely for a rendezvous. The serpent is the key, and this ship was meant to be part of it. As we left the cabin, a crewman, a young lad with nervous eyes, slipped me a folded paper. "Don't let the captain see," he whispered, then vanished into the fog. I tucked it away, my pulse quickening. Back on deck, Holmes noticed my expression. "What is it, Watson?" I showed him the paper, unfolding it carefully. It was a rough sketch of a snake coiled around a dagger, the same symbol from the shipyard. Below it, scrawled in haste, were the words, "Beware the serpent's shadow." Holmes's face tightened. The crew knows more than Thorne admits. Someone's warning us or taunting us. We returned to shore, the fog thicker now, the Mary Celeste II fading behind us. At the inn, Holmes studied the notebook and sketch, his pipe sending clouds of smoke into the air. The serpent is a ship, Watson, and it's carrying something worth killing for. This notebook points to a meeting point, likely near the reef where we saw the lights. Lestrade, pacing, looked frustrated. "But where is it now? We can't keep chasing shadows." Holmes's eyes were hard. "Shadows have patterns, Lestrade. The serpent will dock soon and we'll be there. Tomorrow we map the reef's currents and search for its hiding place." As night fell, I read the lad's note again, the words chilling me. The serpent was out there, its shadow growing closer, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking into its jaws. Holmes, though, was relentless, his mind a blade cutting through the fog of mystery. Chapter 9. The Locked Cabin Mystery. The fog over Blackwater Bay hung heavier than ever, a gray veil that seemed to breathe with the secrets it held. I woke to the distant groan of a ship's hull, the sound swallowed by the damp air. Sherlock. Holmes was already at work in our inn room, the notebook from the Mary Celeste II open on the table, its cryptic symbols scrawled under the light of a flickering lamp. The sketch from the crewman, "Beware the serpent's shadow," lay beside it, its snake and dagger symbol staring up like a warning. Holmes's face was set, his eyes sharp with the focus of a man closing in on his prey. "Watson," he said, not looking up. "The serpent is near, and its purpose is tied to the crew's vanishings. This notebook points to a rendezvous. But we need more. The Eternal Hope holds answers, specifically its captain's cabin. We missed something there." I pulled on my coat, the chill of the fog seeping through the walls. The memory of the serpent's green light and the gunfire that chased us off lingered like a bad taste. The captain's cabin? We searched it. Holmes, blood, papers, a broken compass, what's left? His eyes met mine, glinting with certainty. "A locked door, Watson. The cabin had a second compartment, sealed tight. I saw the outline but didn't press it then. Today we open it." Inspector Lestrade met us at the docks, his face gray with exhaustion. The town was buzzing with fear now, tales of the serpent as a cursed ship spreading like wildfire. "Holmes," he said, rubbing his hands against the cold, "my men are refusing to go near the water. Those shots last night didn't help. What's the plan?" Holmes adjusted his scarf, his voice crisp. "We return to the Eternal Hope. The captain's cabin has a hidden compartment. Whatever's inside will tell us why the crew's vanished and what the serpent wants." Caleb, our fisherman, rowed us out, his face grim as he navigated the fog-choked bay. The Eternal Hope loomed ahead, its masts skeletal against the gray sky, its deck silent except for the creak of wood. We climbed aboard, the air heavy with the smell of salt and dried blood. My hand rested on my revolver, the ship's eerie stillness, making my skin prickle. Holmes led us to the captain's cabin, its door still ajar from our last visit. The room was as we'd left it. Desk smashed, papers scattered, bloodstains dark on the walls. Holmes ignored the chaos, his focus on a wooden panel behind the desk. He ran his fingers along its edge, pressing until a faint click echoed. The panel slid open, revealing a narrow door, locked with a heavy iron bolt. A hidden compartment, Holmes said, pulling out his lock-picking tools. The captain valued secrecy. Lestrade frowned, peering over his shoulder. What's a merchant? Captain hiding? Smuggler's loot? Holmes worked the lock, his movements precise. Not loot, Lestrade. Information, or something worth more than gold. The lock gave way, and the door creaked open, revealing a small, dark space. Inside was a wooden chest, its lid carved with the same snake and dagger symbol we'd seen before. I felt a chill. The serpent again. Holmes opened the chest, revealing a bundle of letters, a small brass key, and a sealed vial of dark liquid, similar to the ink we'd found before. He unfolded the letters, his eyes scanning quickly. More ciphers, he said, but different. These are orders, not coordinates. And look. He held up a letter with a wax seal stamped with the snake and dagger mark. This is no smuggler's code. It's organized, professional. I picked up the key, turning it in the light. What's this for? Holmes took it, examining its teeth. A safe, perhaps, or another locked box. The captain was guarding something specific. He sniffed the vial, his brow furrowing. This ink, it's the same as the Star of Dover's. Invisible under normal light, but it glows under the right conditions. A spy's trick. Lestrade's eyes widened. Spies? You think this is bigger than smuggling? Holmes didn't answer, his focus on the letters. These mention a delivery to Blackwater Bay timed with the Serpent's arrival. The crews knew too much, Watson. That's why they're gone. We searched the rest of the cabin but found no safe or box to match the key. The bloodstains seemed to mock us, their trails leading nowhere. As we stepped back onto the deck, a faint noise broke the silence. A low, rhythmic thud, like something heavy hitting wood. Holmes froze, his head tilting. It's below, he said. The hold. We descended into the cargo hold, the air colder and damper, the smell of spices mixing with decay. The crates were as we'd left them, but Holmes moved to one in the corner, its lid slightly askew. He lifted it, revealing a false bottom. Beneath it was a trapdoor, bolted shut, its lock matching the brass key. Holmes inserted the key, turning it with a soft click. The trapdoor opened, revealing a ladder descending into darkness. Stay close, he said, lighting his lantern and climbing down. I followed, my heart pounding, Lestrade close behind. The space below was cramped, the air thick with mildew. The lantern's glow revealed a small room, its walls lined with shelves. On one was a single object, a black metal box, its surface etched with the snake and dagger symbol. Holmes opened it, revealing a stack of documents, each marked with the same seal. Plans, Holmes said, his voice low. Shipping routes, names, payments. This is no ordinary smuggling ring, Watson. It's a network, and the Serpent is its courier. Before we could read more, a loud creak echoed above, followed by footsteps. Heavy, deliberate. Holmes doused the lantern, plunging us into darkness. Someone's on board, he whispered. Stay quiet. We crept up the ladder, my revolver drawn. The deck was empty, but the fog seemed thicker, hiding whoever was there. A shadow moved near the railing, tall and cloaked, the man in the dark coat. He turned, his face hidden, and vanished over the side, a splash marking his escape into the water. Holmes cursed softly. He's fast, but he's leaving too many trails. We rowed back to shore, the documents and key safely in Holmes's coat. At the inn, he spread the papers out, his pipe filling the room with smoke. These are contracts, he said, for a delivery to a man named R. The Serpent is bringing it, and the crews were silenced to protect it. I felt a knot in my stomach. Who's R? Holmes's eyes were hard. That's what we find out next. Tomorrow we track the Serpent's path and decode these letters. The man in the dark coat is close, Watson, and he's running out of places to hide. As I lay in bed, the thud from the ship echoed in my mind, like the bay itself was warning us. The fog pressed against the windows, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the serpent's shadow was growing longer, pulling us deeper into its web. Chapter 10. Whispers of Mutiny. The fog over Blackwater Bay clung to the dawn like a heavy cloak, its gray swirls hiding the horizon and muffling the cries of gulls. I woke in our inn-room, the air damp and cold, the memory of the eternal hopes, hidden compartment and the black metal box heavy in my mind. Sherlock Holmes was already at the table, surrounded by the documents we'd found, his pipe sending curls of smoke into the dim light. The snake and dagger seal stared up from the papers, a silent challenge. His face was sharp with focus, his fingers tracing the coded lines as if they whispered secrets only he could hear. "Watson," he said, his voice low, "these documents are a map of betrayal. The crews of the Eternal Hope and Star of Dover weren't just victims, they were complicit. There's evidence of mutiny here, a plan gone wrong." I pulled on my coat, my heart sinking. "Mutiny? You think the crews turned on their captains?" Holmes nodded, holding up a letter. "This mentions a split among the men, a disagreement over the delivery. Jem Walsh's name appears again alongside R. They were planning something, Watson, and it cost them their lives." Inspector Lestrade joined us, his boots heavy on the inn's creaky floor. His face was drawn, the strain of the case etched deep. "Holmes, the town's in a panic. Another light was spotted last night, green, near the reef. The men won't go near the water now. What's next?" Holmes folded the letters, his eyes glinting. "We return to the Mary Celeste II. Its crew is still alive, unlike the others. They know something, about Walsh, the serpent, or this mutiny. We'll make them talk." The docks were quiet, the fog so thick it felt like walking through a dream. Caleb rowed us out to the Mary Celeste II, his hands steady but his eyes nervous. The ship loomed ahead, its lanterns glowing faintly, a stark contrast to the empty, eternal hope. As we climbed aboard, the crew watched us, their faces hard, their hands close to their knives. Captain Thorne met us on deck, his gray beard bristling. "Back again, Holmes? My men are jumpy and I don't like questions stirring them up." Holmes's voice was sharp. "Your men know more than you're admitting, Captain. Jem Walsh was here, planning a mutiny tied to a shipment, the Serpent's cargo. Tell me what you heard or I'll have Lestrade search every inch of the ship." Thorne's eyes narrowed, but he didn't back down. "Mutiny? That's nonsense. My crew's loyal. Walsh came by, sure, but he was just talking cargo, said nothing about trouble." Holmes stepped closer, his gaze piercing. "You're protecting someone, Thorne. Your voice wavered when you said loyal. Who's whispering mutiny among your men?" Thorne hesitated, then gestured to a young sailor nearby, the same lad who'd slipped me the note about the serpent's shadow. "Ben, tell them what you told me." Ben, barely 18, shifted nervously, his eyes darting. "Heard some of the men talking late at night, sir. Below, deck a week ago. They mentioned Walsh, said he was pushing for a bigger cut of something valuable. Said the serpent was bringing it and they'd take it if the captain didn't agree." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "Who were these men?" Ben swallowed hard. "Didn't see their faces, sir. It was dark, and they stopped when they heard me. But one had a foreign accent, Spanish maybe." Lestrade cursed under his breath. "The man in the dark coat." Holmes nodded. "Likely. Ben, where did this talk happen?" "Near the forward hold," Ben said. "They were by the cargo check-in. Crates." We followed Ben below deck, the air growing colder and heavier with the smell of tar and spices. The forward hold was packed with crates, their labels faded but legible. Spices, cloth, nothing unusual. Holmes tapped one, listening to the hollow sound. "Another false bottom," he said, prying it open. Inside was a small leather pouch, heavy with coins. Spanish, like those Grayson had shown us. "Payment," Holmes said, weighing the pouch, "or a bribe. The mutiny was planned here, Watson, but something went wrong. Lestrade frowned. Wrong how? The crews are gone. Holmes's lips pressed thin. Betrayal. Someone double-crossed them, likely the man in the dark coat. He used their greed, then silenced them. We searched the hold further, finding a hidden panel behind a stack of crates. It opened to a small alcove, its walls scratched with more snake and dagger symbols. A single paper lay inside, crumpled and stained with blood. Holmes unfolded it, revealing a list of names, Jem Walsh among them, crossed out in red ink. A death list, I whispered, my stomach turning. Holmes nodded. Holmes. The mutineers marked for elimination. The Serpent's masters don't tolerate disloyalty. As we left the hold, a loud thud echoed from the deck above, followed by a shout. We raced up, finding the crew gathered around a fallen crate, its contents, spices, spilled across the planks. A sailor pointed to the rigging where a rope swung loose. Someone was here, he said, his voice shaky. Cut the rope and ran. Holmes climbed the rigging, his movements swift, and found a fresh cigarette butt wedged in a knot of rope. Our man, he said, sniffing it. He's watching us, even here. Back at the inn, Holmes spread out the new findings, the coins, the blood-stained list, the coded letters. He worked late, his pipe smoke thick in the air as he pieced together the cipher. The Serpent is due to dock tomorrow night, he said at last. The coordinates match the reef. The mutiny was a power play, Watson, but the man in the dark coat played them all. I felt a chill. What's the cargo, Holmes? What's worth all this? His eyes were hard. Something dangerous, documents perhaps, or a weapon. The Serpent is no ordinary ship, and R is no ordinary man. Tomorrow we set a trap at the reef. As night fell, the fog pressed against the windows, the bay's silence louder than ever. The blood-stained list haunted me, each crossed-out name a ghost. The Serpent was coming, and with it the truth or our end. Chapter 11. The Captain's Log. The fog over Blackwater Bay was a living thing, its gray tendrils curling through the dawn, swallowing the docks and the skeletal shapes of moored ships. I woke to the low groan of a foghorn, its mournful sound barely cutting through the damp air. Sherlock Holmes sat at the inn's table, surrounded by the spoils of our investigation. The coded letters, the blood-stained list of names, the Spanish coins, and the snake and dagger sketch. His pipe lay cold, a rare sign of his total focus. The notebook from the Mary Celeste II was open, its cryptic symbols half decoded under his steady hand. Watson, he said, his voice sharp. The Serpent docks tomorrow night, if the cipher is correct, but we're missing a piece, the Eternal Hope's captain's log. It's the key to the mutiny and the cargo. We must return to the ship. I pulled on my coat, the weight of last night's discoveries pressing on me. The list with Jem Walsh's name crossed out, the mutiny's betrayal, the man in the dark coat. It all pointed to a deadly game. The log, I said. We found it before, Holmes. It mentioned strange lights and whispers, but nothing clear. His eyes met mine, glinting with certainty. We saw a fragment, Watson. Captain Harrow was careful. If he kept a hidden compartment, he kept a private log, one that details the Serpent's role. We find it. We find the truth. Inspector Lestrade joined us at the docks, his face grim under the fog's gray pallor. The town was gripped by fear now, the Serpent's legend growing with every whispered tale of green lights and vanished crews. Holmes, he said, my men are refusing to board the Eternal Hope again. They say it's cursed. I'm inclined to agree. Holmes's lips twitched. Curses are excuses for cowardice, Lestrade. The Eternal Hope holds answers, not ghosts. Get us a boat. Caleb, our fisherman, rowed us out, his hands steady but his eyes darting nervously. The fog was thicker than ever, the Eternal Hope a dark shadow against the gray water. We climbed aboard, the deck creaking under our feet, the bloodstains from our first visit now dark and crusted. The air felt heavy, charged with silence, and my hand rested on my revolver. Holmes led us to the captain's cabin, its wrecked interior unchanged. Smashed desk, scattered papers, blood on the walls. He ignored the chaos, his focus on the hidden compartment we'd found before. The log we saw was a decoy, he said, tapping the walls. Harrow was no fool. He'd keep the real one close. He pressed a panel near the bunk and a faint click sounded. A small drawer slid open, revealing a leather-bound book, its cover worn but unmarked. Holmes opened it, his eyes scanning the tight, neat handwriting. "This is it," he said. "The captain's private log." He read aloud, his voice steady. "October 10th. Walsh grows bold, demands a larger share. Says the Serpent's cargo is worth a fortune. I refused. Heard whispers at night. Not the crew. Something watches us." I felt a chill. Whispers again, like the ones Silas mentioned. Holmes nodded, turning the page. October 12th. Met with R at the reef. He insists on silence, threatens the crew. The cargo must not be found. I fear betrayal. Lestrade leaned in, his face pale. "Who's this R? The man in the dark coat?" "Possibly," Holmes said. "Or his master. Listen." He read on. October 14th, mutiny brewing. Walsh rallied half the crew, promising riches. The Serpent arrives tomorrow. I've hidden the truth in the hold. If I fall, let this log speak. Holmes closed the book, his face taut. The truth in the hold? Harrow knew he was doomed. We descended to the cargo hold, the air cold and thick with the smell of spices and decay. Holmes moved to the trapdoor we'd found before, its lock already opened by the brass key. Below, in the hidden room, he searched the shelves, finding a small sealed packet tucked behind a loose plank. He tore it open, revealing a single sheet, a map of Blackwater Bay marked with a red X near the reef. "The Serpent's docking point," Holmes said, tracing the X. "Tomorrow night, as the cipher predicted." I frowned, my heart racing. "What's the cargo, Holmes? Why all this bloodshed?" He folded the map, his eyes hard. "Something that threatens power, secrets, documents, or worse. The mutiny failed because someone, likely R, wanted no witnesses." As we climbed back to the deck, a low thud echoed from the bow, followed by a scraping sound. Holmes froze, his hand signaling silence. "We're not alone," he whispered. We crept forward, my revolver drawn, the fog hiding everything beyond a few feet. A shadow moved near the railing, tall, cloaked, the man in the dark coat. He held a lantern, its green glow faint but unmistakable. Holmes lunged, but the man was quick, tossing the lantern into the water and leaping over the side. A splash marked his escape. Holmes cursed, peering into the fog. "He's mocking us, Watson, but he's scared, leaving lanterns running. He knows we're close." We rowed back to shore, the map and log safely in Holmes's coat. At the inn, he spread them out, cross-referencing the coordinates with his charts. "The reef," he said, "is a smuggler's haven. Hidden coves, shallow caves. The Serpent will dock there and we'll be waiting." Lestrade paced, his voice tense. "A trap, Holmes? After last night's gunfire? You're mad." Holmes's eyes were like steel. "Madness is letting murderers slip away, Lestrade. Tomorrow we end this." As night fell, the fog pressed against the windows, the bay's silence deafening. The captain's log haunted me. Whispers, betrayal, a cargo, worth dying for. The Serpent was coming, and with it a truth that felt more dangerous with every step we took. Chapter 12. A cipher in the cargo hold. The fog over Blackwater Bay was a relentless shroud, wrapping the morning in a gray haze that dulled every sound and hid every shape. I woke to the faint creak of the inn's floorboards, my mind heavy with the captain's log from the Eternal Hope, its talk of mutiny, whispers, and a deadly cargo. Sherlock Holmes sat at the table, surrounded by papers, the coded letters, the blood-stained list, the map marked with the reef's red X, and the log itself. His pipe was cold, his eyes burning with a focus that made the room feel smaller. "Watson," he said, his voice sharp. "The Serpent docks tonight at the reef according to the map, but the cipher in these letters holds the final piece. What the cargo is and who R is. We need to crack it, and the Star of Dover's cargo hold may have more answers." I pulled on my coat. the chill of the fog seeping through the walls. The thought of returning to the blood-streaked Star of Dover made my stomach turn, but Holmes's certainty was a tether. "The cargo hold?" I said. "We searched it before. Crates, spices, the locked box. What's left?" Holmes folded the map, his eyes glinting. "We missed something, Watson. The Star of Dover was the first to go silent, and its hold had a false bottom. There's more hidden there, something tied to the cipher." Inspector Lestrade met us at the docks, his face pale and drawn. The town was a cauldron of fear now, with sailors refusing to work and locals whispering of the Serpent as a ghost, ship that devoured men. "Holmes," he said, his voice tight, "my men are at their wits' end. Another light was reported last night. Green, near the reef. If we don't find answers soon, I'll have a mutiny of my own." Holmes' lips twitched. "Then let's not waste time, Lestrade. To the Star of Dover." Caleb rowed us out, his hands steady despite the fear in his eyes. The fog was so thick it felt like a weight, muffling the splash of oars and the creak of the boat. The Star of Dover loomed ahead, its hull dark and silent, a twin to the Eternal Hope's eerie emptiness. We climbed aboard, the deck slick with mist, the bloodstains now black and crusted. My hand rested on my revolver, the ship's stillness unnerving. Holmes led us to the cargo hold, the air heavy with the smell of spices and rot. The crates were as we'd left them, stacked tightly, but Holmes moved to one in the corner, its wood slightly warped. "This one," he said, tapping it. "The nails are loose and the grain is off, newer than the rest." He pried it open, revealing another false bottom. Beneath it was a narrow compartment, holding a single item. A small, leather-bound journal, its cover marked with the snake and dagger symbol. Holmes opened it, revealing pages of numbers and letters, a cipher denser than the others. "This is it," he said, his voice low. "The key to the Serpent's cargo." Lestrade peered over, his shoulder frowning. "Another code? How's this different?" Holmes's fingers traced the lines. "It's a substitution cipher, but layered, dates, names, and quantities. Look." He pointed to a line. "R to receive. Serpent carries 12 units, silence crew." I felt a chill. 12 units of what, and silence crew, that's murder. Holmes nodded, his face grim. "Exactly, Watson. The cargo is no ordinary contraband. It's something worth killing an entire crew to protect. Documents, weapons, or worse." We searched the hold further, finding more clues. A scrap of cloth, dark and coarse, caught on a nail, a broken pen, its nib stained with the strange ink we'd seen before, and a faint scratch on the wall, another snake and dagger mark. Holmes pocketed the cloth, his eyes narrowing. "The man in the dark coat was here, he's tying up loose ends." As we climbed back to the deck, a low thud echoed from the stern, followed by a faint scrape, like metal on wood. Holmes froze, his hand signaling silence. "He's back," he whispered. "Stay low." We crept toward the sound, my revolver drawn, the fog hiding everything beyond a few feet. A shadow moved near the helm, tall, cloaked, the man in the dark coat. He was tampering with a rope, his movements quick. Holmes lunged, but the man was faster, slipping over the side with a soft splash. By the time we reached the railing, the fog had swallowed him. Holmes cursed, picking up a dropped item, a small silver whistle, etched with the snake and dagger symbol. "A signal whistle," he said, turning it over. "Used to call the Serpent, or its men. He's desperate, Watson. He knows we're close." We rowed back to shore, the journal and whistle in Holmes's coat. At the inn, he spread out the cipher, working feverishly with pencil and paper. The code began to yield, names, dates, and a chilling phrase. "Serpent's cargo, Blackwater delivery for our power beyond gold." Lestrade paced, his voice tense. "Power? What does that mean? Guns? Secrets?" Holmes's eyes were hard. "Something that shifts balances, perhaps information, a treaty, or a weapon. The Serpent is a courier, and R is its master. Tonight, we set a trap at the reef." I swallowed hard, the gunfire from our last encounter echoing in my mind. A trap? Holmes, they shot at us last time. He looked up, his face like steel. And they missed, Watson. Tonight, we don't chase shadows, we catch them. As night fell, we prepared for the reef, the fog thicker than ever, the bay silent except for the distant lap of waves. The cipher's words haunted me. Power beyond. Gold. The serpent was coming, and with it a truth that felt like a storm waiting to break. Chapter 13. The fisherman's testimony. The fog over Blackwater Bay hung like a heavy curtain, its gray swirls swallowing the dawn and muffling the world. I woke in our inn-room, the air damp and cold, the memory of the Star of Dover's cipher. Journal sharp in my mind. Serpent's cargo, Blackwater delivery for our power beyond gold. Sherlock Holmes was already at the table, surrounded by his clues. The coded letters, the blood-stained list, the snake and dagger whistle, and the reef map with its red X. His pipe lay untouched, his eyes burning with a restless intensity. "Watson," he said, his voice low, "the serpent docks tonight at the reef. The cipher points to a delivery, but we need more. Witnesses who've seen it move. The fishermen know these waters. One of them will talk." I pulled on my coat, the weight of the case pressing on me. The man in the dark coat, the gunfire, the mutiny's betrayal. It all felt like a net tightening around us. "The fishermen are scared, Holmes," I said. "They think the serpent's a ghost ship. What makes you think they'll help?" His eyes met mine, sharp as a blade. "Fear loosens tongues, Watson. They've seen things. Lights, shadows, movements. We find the right man. We find the serpent's path." Inspector Lestrade met us at the docks, his face lined with exhaustion. The town was a powder keg of panic, with sailors refusing to sail and locals locking their doors at night. "Holmes," he said, his voice hoarse. "Another light was spotted. Green, near the reef, just before dawn. My men won't go near the water. What's the plan?" Holmes adjusted his scarf, his gaze fixed on the fog-choked bay. "We speak to the fishermen. One of them knows the serpent's movements. Take us to the Rusty Anchor." The tavern was dim, its air thick with smoke and the sour smell of ale. Fishermen and dock workers hunched over tables, their voices low, their eyes darting as we entered. Lestrade led us to a corner where an old fisherman sat alone, his hands gnarled from years at sea, his face weathered like driftwood. His name was Amos, the watchman who'd first found the eternal hope. "Amos," Holmes said, sitting across from him. "You saw the eternal hope abandoned, blood on its decks. You've seen the green lights. Tell me about the serpent." Amos, eyes narrowed, his fingers tightening around his mug. "Ain't no ghost ship if that's what you're thinking. I've fished these waters 40 years. Seen things. Lights, strange boats, men moving in the fog. That serpent ain't no myth. It's real. And it's trouble." Holmes leaned forward, his voice calm but pressing. "What did you see, Amos?" "Exactly." The old man hesitated, glancing at the door. "3 nights back near the reef. Green light, low on the water, moving slow. Thought it was a lantern at first, but it was too steady, too quiet. Then I saw the ship, sleek, black, no name on the hull. It stopped near the caves, then vanished." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "The caves? Describe them." Amos scratched his beard. "Shallow ones west of the reef. Smugglers use them. Hard to spot, harder to reach. Currents'll kill you if you don't know the way." Lestrade frowned. "Why didn't you report this sooner?" Amos glared. "And get my throat cut? Whoever's running that ship don't like witnesses. I saw a man on the shore that night, tall, dark coat, smoking. He was watching the serpent, same as me." Holmes's fingers tapped the table. "The man in the dark coat. Did he see you?" Amos shook his head. "Doubt it. I stayed low, rode back quiet, but I heard something, a whistle sharp and quick like a signal. Then the light went out." Holmes pulled the silver whistle from his coat, holding it up. "Like this?" Amos's eyes widened. "Aye, that's the one. Where'd you get it?" Holmes pocketed it, his face unreadable. "From someone careless." Thank you, Amos. You've been most helpful. We left the tavern, the fog thicker outside, curling around the docks like a living thing. Lestrade was tense. Holmes? The caves? You're not thinking of going there. The currents are deadly, and after last night's shooting, Holmes cut him off. The caves are where the serpent hides, Lestrade. Amos' testimony confirms the map's coordinates. Tonight we set our trap. Back at the inn, Holmes spread out the map, marking the caves west of the reef. He studied the cipher journal, his pencil scratching as he decoded more lines. The serpent delivers to R tonight, he said. The cargo is described as sealed units, small, valuable, and dangerous. We need to be there when it docks. I felt a knot in my stomach. Holmes, we were shot at last time. The man in the dark coat, he's watching us. His eyes were hard. Let him watch. He's slipping, Watson, leaving whistles, showing himself. Tonight we turn the hunter into the hunted. As dusk fell, we prepared for the reef, gathering lanterns, ropes, and my revolver, fully loaded. Caleb agreed to row us, though his hands shook as he readied the boat. The fog was a wall now, the bay silent except for the faint lap of waves. We set out, the water black and still, the air cold enough to sting my face. At the reef, the fog parted just enough to show the cave's mouth, a dark gash in the rock, barely visible. Holmes doused our lantern, his voice a whisper. Wait for the light. Minutes dragged like hours, my heart pounding. Then, there, a green glow, flickering near the cave. The serpent emerged, its sleek hull gliding silently. A figure stood at the bow, the man in the dark coat, his lantern casting the eerie light. He blew the whistle, its sharp note cutting the fog. Holmes signaled Caleb to row closer, but a crack split the air, a gunshot from the shore. The bullet splashed near us, and the serpent's light vanished, the ship slipping back into the fog. Holmes cursed, his eyes scanning the darkness. He's on the shore, he said. Row back now. We reached the shore, but the man was gone, leaving only a fresh cigarette butt and a single boot print in the mud. Holmes picked up the butt, his face grim. He's taunting us, but he's scared. We're too close. Back at the inn, Holmes studied the map and cipher, his mind racing. The caves are the key, he said. The serpent will return and R will be there. Tomorrow, we explore the caves, by daylight, to avoid their traps. As I lay in bed, Amos's words echoed. Whistles, lights, a ship that moved like a shadow. The serpent was real, and its cargo was a secret worth killing for. The fog pressed against the windows, and I felt its weight, like the bay itself was closing in. Chapter 14. The Woman in White. The fog over Blackwater Bay clung to the morning like a stubborn veil, its gray swirls hiding the cliffs and muffling the distant crash of waves. I woke in our inn room, the air damp and heavy, the memory of last night's chase at the reef still sharp, gunshots, the serpent's green light, and the man in the dark coat slipping away again. Sherlock Holmes stood by the table, surrounded by his growing collection of clues. The cipher journal, the captain's log, the snake and dagger whistle, and the map with its red X marking the caves. His pipe was cold, his eyes burning with a focus that made the small room feel tighter. Watson, he said, his voice low and urgent, the serpent uses the caves as its haven, but someone on shore is guiding it. Amos's testimony points to a network, and the man in the dark coat isn't working alone. We need to explore the caves today by daylight to avoid their traps. I pulled on my coat, the weight of the case pressing harder, the cipher's chilling words, power beyond gold, and the blood-stained list haunted me. Holmes, I said, the caves are dangerous, the currents, the fog, and that man, he's always one step ahead. His eyes met mine, sharp as steel. Then we take the step first, Watson. The caves hold answers, and I suspect we'll find more than smugglers' tracks. Inspector Lestrade met us at the docks, his face etched with worry. The town was paralyzed now, shops shuttered and fishermen staying ashore, their talk of the serpent as a cursed ship drowning out reason. Holmes, he said, rubbing his hands against the chill, my men are refusing to go near the reef. After last night's shooting, what's the plan? Holmes adjusted his scarf, his gaze fixed on the fog-choked bay. We explore the caves west of the reef. Amos mentioned smugglers' hideouts. If the Serpent docks there, we'll find evidence. Cargo, signals, or the man in the dark coat himself. Caleb, our fisherman, rowed us out, his hand steady but his voice tense. Them caves ain't safe, Mr. Holmes. Currents'll pull you under and the rocks are sharp. Smugglers know the way, I don't. Holmes nodded, unperturbed. Then you'll get us close, Caleb. We'll manage the rest. The reef loomed through the fog, its jagged rocks barely visible. Caleb navigated carefully, dropping us at a narrow ledge near the cave's mouth. The entrance was a dark slit, its edges slick with seaweed. Holmes lit his lantern, its glow weak against the fog. Stay close, Watson, he said, stepping inside. The cave was damp and cold, the air thick with salt and decay. The walls glistened, carved by centuries of waves, and the floor was uneven, littered with broken shells. Holmes moved like a hunter, his eyes scanning every inch. He paused at a pile of crates, their wood new and unmarked. Smuggler's work, he said, prying one open. Inside were bottles of dark liquid, similar to the strange ink we'd found before. Invisible ink, Holmes said, holding a bottle to the light. For coded messages. The Serpent's network is meticulous. Lestrade frowned, his voice echoing. Messages for who? This R you keep mentioning? Holmes didn't answer, his attention on a faint scratch on the wall. A snake and dagger. Symbol, freshly carved. They've been here recently, he said, and they're not alone. A soft sound echoed deeper in the cave, a rustle, like fabric on stone. Holmes doused the lantern, plunging us into darkness. My hand went to my revolver, my heart pounding. What was that? I whispered. Holmes signaled silence, creeping forward. The rustle came again, closer, followed by a faint gasp. We rounded a corner, and there, in a dim shaft of light filtering through a crack above, stood a woman. She wore a white dress, stained, with mud, her face pale and her eyes wide with fear. She froze, clutching a small bundle to her chest. Who are you? Holmes demanded, his voice low but firm. The woman stepped back, her voice trembling. Please don't hurt me, I'm not part of this. Holmes raised a hand, calming. We're not here to hurt you. I'm Sherlock Holmes, a detective. This is Dr. Watson and Inspector Lestrade. Why are you in these caves? She hesitated, her eyes darting to the shadows. My name's Eliza. I was looking for my brother Tom. He sailed on the Eternal Hope. He didn't come home. Holmes's eyes narrowed. Tom, the dock worker we met at the Rusty Anchor? She nodded, tears welling. He told me he was in trouble, said he'd joined something dangerous, a job with a ship called the Serpent. Last week he said he'd meet me here in the caves. He never came. Lestrade stepped forward. Why the caves? What was he doing? Eliza clutched her bundle tighter. A small journal, I realized. He wouldn't say much, just that the Serpent was bringing something big, something that scared him. He gave me this. She held out the journal. Said to keep it safe? Holmes took it, flipping through pages filled with hurried notes and symbols. Another cipher, he said, but personal. Tom's handwriting, not the Serpent's code. He was documenting their plans. He read aloud. R demands loyalty. Cargo arrives 17th. Must escape before they find me. I felt a chill. The 17th, that's tonight. Holmes nodded, pocketing the journal. Eliza, did Tom mention a man in a dark coat? Her eyes widened. Yes. He said a man was watching him, always smoking, always in the shadows. Tom was terrified of him. Holmes exchanged a glance with me. The man in the dark coat. He's tying up loose ends. A sudden noise echoed. A sharp whistle, the same as the one we'd found. Eliza gasped, backing against the wall. Holmes drew us into a crevice, his voice a whisper. He's here. Footsteps crunched outside, slow and deliberate. A green light flickered at the cave's mouth, then faded. The man in the dark coat was close, but the fog hid him. We waited, breathless, until the footsteps retreated. Holmes stepped out, his face grim. He knows we're here, but he's not ready to strike. We escorted Eliza back to the ledge where Caleb waited. She was shaking, but her eyes were fierce. "Find my brother, Mr. Holmes," she said. "Please." Holmes nodded. "We will, Eliza. Stay hidden and tell no one of this journal." Back, at the inn, Holmes studied Tom's journal, its notes confirming the Serpent's docking tonight. "Tom was part of the mutiny," he said, "but he wanted out. That's why he's missing, and why the Serpent's crew is being silenced." Lestrade paced, frustrated. He's behind it all, isn't he? Who is he?" Holmes's eyes were hard. "A puppet master, Lestrade. Tonight, at the reef, we'll find out. We set the trap, and the Serpent will lead us to him. As night fell, the fog pressed closer, the bay's silence a warning. Eliza's journal, Tom's fear, the man in the dark coat, it all pointed to a reckoning. The Serpent was coming, and I felt its shadow looming larger than ever. Chapter 15. A trail of blood and salt, the fog over Blackwater Bay clung to the dawn like a heavy mist, its gray swirls muffling the cries of gulls and the creak of distant ships. I woke in our inn-room, the air damp and cold, the weight of Eliza's journal and her brother Tom's desperate words heavy in my mind. Sherlock Holmes sat at the table, surrounded by his clues, the coded letters, the snake and dagger whistle, the reef map, and now Tom's journal, its hurried notes hinting at the Serpent's deadly cargo. His eyes were sharp, his pipe untouched, a sign of his relentless focus. "Watson," he said, his voice low, "tonight is the Serpent's rendezvous at the reef. Tom's journal confirms it, a delivery for R, something worth killing. But we need more. The trail of blood on the Eternal Hope and Star of Dover wasn't random, it leads somewhere." I pulled on my coat, my heart heavy with the case's growing darkness. "The blood trails," I said. "They stopped at the cabins, didn't they? No bodies, no answers. Where do we look now?" Holmes folded Tom's journal, his eyes glinting. "The blood tells a story, Watson. It wasn't just violence, it was a message. We return to the Eternal Hope. The trail starts there." Inspector Lestrade met us at the docks, his face pale and tense. The town was a ghost of itself, with fishermen staying ashore and whispers of the Serpent as a cursed ship spreading like wildfire. "Holmes," he said, his voice tight, "my men are refusing to board any more ships. The fog, the lights, the gunfire, they're saying it's not worth their lives. What's the plan?" Holmes adjusted his scarf, his gaze fixed on the fog-choked bay. "We follow the blood, Lestrade. The Eternal Hope's deck holds more than we saw. The trail will lead us to the Serpent's purpose." Caleb rode us out, his hands shaking despite his steady strokes. The fog was a wall, the Eternal Hope a dark shape looming through it. We climbed aboard, the deck slick with mist, the bloodstains, now black and crusted. The air felt heavy, the silence broken only by the lap of waves. My hand rested on my revolver, the ship's stillness unnerving. Holmes moved to the deck's bloodiest spot, near the railing, where a wide smear trailed toward the cabins. He knelt, his fingers tracing the stain. "This wasn't a struggle," he said. "It was deliberate, dragged, not spilled. Someone wanted it seen." I frowned, my stomach turning. "A message, like you said. But for who?" Holmes stood, his eyes scanning the deck. "For anyone who followed. Look." He pointed to a faint scratch in the wood, barely visible under the blood. It was a tiny snake and dagger symbol carved with a knife. "The Serpent's mark. The blood leads to it." We followed the trail below deck, the air colder and damper, the smell of salt and decay stronger. The blood smear continued down the passage, stopping at a locked hatch we hadn't noticed before, hidden behind a stack of crates. Holmes examined the lock, his tools already in hand. "This wasn't here by chance," he said, working the bolt. "The captain hid something beyond." The hatch creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Holmes lit, his lantern, its glow casting long shadows. "Stay close. he said, leading the way. I followed, my revolver drawn, Lestrade close behind, his face pale. The staircase led to a small chamber, its walls damp and stained with salt. The floor was littered with broken glass and torn cloth, and a single crate stood in the center, its lid pried open. Inside was a bundle of papers soaked in blood, and a small sealed canister, its surface etched with the snake and dagger symbol. Holmes opened the canister, revealing a tightly rolled parchment. He unrolled it, his eyes scanning quickly. A manifest, he said, but not for spices. It lists sealed units, 12, as the cipher mentioned, and a name, R. Salazar. Lestrade's eyes widened. Salazar? That's R? Holmes nodded, his face grim. Likely. The manifest details a delivery to Blackwater Bay tonight at the Reef's Caves. The blood here. He gestured to the papers. It's fresh, no more than a day old. Someone was caught here, silenced. I felt a chill. The crew. They were killed here, weren't they? Holmes's lips pressed thin. Some, perhaps. But the lack of bodies suggests they were moved, dumped in the bay or taken by the serpent. A faint noise echoed above. A soft thud like a footstep. Holmes doused the lantern, plunging us into darkness. He's here, he whispered. The man in the dark coat. We crept up the stairs, my heart pounding. The fog outside the hatch, thick and silent. A shadow moved near the railing, tall, cloaked, a cigarette's glow briefly lighting his face. Holmes lunged, but the man was quick, slipping over the side with a splash. By the time we reached the railing, the fog had swallowed him. Holmes cursed, picking up a dropped item, a small silver compass, its needle stuck, etched with the snake and dagger symbol. He's leaving gifts, Holmes said, his voice hard. He wants us to know he's watching. We rowed back to shore, the manifest and compass in Holmes's coat. At the inn, he spread out the papers, cross-referencing them with Tom's journal and the cipher. Salazar, he said, is no ordinary smuggler. The cargo, sealed units, is likely documents or materials of strategic value. The serpent is his courier, and the crews were expendable. Lestrade paced, his voice tense. Documents for what? War? Politics? Holmes's eyes were like steel. Power, Lestrade. The kind that topples governments or starts wars. Tonight, at the reef, we intercept the serpent and Salazar. As night fell, we prepared for the trap, the fog thicker than ever, the bay silent except for the distant crash of waves. The manifest's words, R. Salazar, sealed units, echoed in my mind, a trail of blood and salt leading us to a truth that felt more dangerous with every step. Chapter 16. The Reef's Ambush. The fog over Blackwater Bay was a suffocating veil, its gray swirls so thick they seemed to pulse with malice as night fell. I sat in our inn room, the air heavy with damp, my mind racing with the weight of our discoveries, the Eternal Hope's hidden chamber, the blood-soaked manifest naming R. Salazar, and the cryptic sealed units tied to the serpent. Sherlock Holmes stood by the table, his lantern casting shadows over the cipher journal, the captain's log, the snake and dagger compass, and the reef map marked with its red X. His face was taut, his eyes burning with the intensity of a man, on the cusp of unraveling a deadly truth. Watson, he said, his voice low and sharp. The serpent docks tonight at the Reef's Caves, delivering its cargo to Salazar. We set a trap. Catch the ship, the man in the dark coat, or both. This ends now. I adjusted my revolver, the memory of gunfire on the water making my stomach knot. Holmes, they shot at us last time. The man in the dark coat. He's always a step ahead, and Salazar, we don't even know who he is. Holmes folded the map, his eyes like steel. He's the puppet master, Watson. The serpent is his tool, and the man in the dark coat his blade. The reef is our ground tonight. We'll turn their ambush into ours. Inspector Lestrade joined us, his face pale under the dim light of the inn's lamps. The town was a shadow of itself. Docks deserted, windows shuttered against the fog's chill. Holmes, he said, his voice hoarse. My men won't go near the reef. The Serpent's legend has them spooked. Green lights, missing crews. I'm with you, but we're on our own. Holmes nodded, unperturbed. Then we move light and fast, Lestrade. Caleb will row us. We need silence and surprise. Caleb waited at the docks, his boat ready, his hands trembling as he gripped the oars. I'll get you to the reef, Mr. Holmes, he said, but them caves, something ain't right there. I'll stay close, but I ain't going in. Holmes clapped his shoulder. Get us there, Caleb. That's enough. We set out into the bay, the fog a wall that swallowed sound and sight. The water was black, the air cold enough to sting my face. My revolver felt heavy in my coat, the weight of the trap we were setting pressing on me. The Serpent was no ghost, but its shadow loomed larger with every stroke of the oars. We reached the reef, its jagged rocks barely visible through the fog. The cave's mouth yawned ahead, a dark gash in the cliff. Holmes doused our lantern, his voice a whisper. We wait here, at the entrance. The Serpent will signal, green light, whistle. When it does, we move. Minutes stretched into an hour, the silence broken only by the lap of waves against the rocks. My heart pounded, my eyes straining in the dark. Then a faint green glow flickered deep in the cave, followed by the sharp note of a whistle, the same as the one we'd found. Holmes tensed, his hand signaling us to stay low. The Serpent glided into view, its sleek hull cutting through the water, silent as a specter. The green light pulsed at its bow, and a figure stood there, the man in the dark coat, his face hidden. Another figure joined him, taller, cloaked in a long coat, moving with authority. Salazar, Holmes whispered, his eyes narrowing. The ship anchored near the cave, and the two men disembarked, carrying a small crate marked with the snake and dagger symbol. They vanished into the cave, their lantern's glow fading. Holmes motioned us forward, and we crept along the ledge, my revolver drawn, Lestrade's breath ragged behind me. Inside the cave, the air was damp and cold, the walls slick with seaweed. The green light flickered ahead, guiding us deeper. We rounded a corner, and there they were, Salazar and the man in the dark coat, crouched over the crate, its lid open. Inside gleamed a dozen small, sealed canisters, their surfaces etched with strange symbols. Holmes stepped into the light, his voice cutting through the silence. R. Salazar, I presume. Step away from the crate. The man in the dark coat spun, drawing a pistol, but Salazar raised a hand, his face calm but cold, his accent faintly Spanish. Mr. Holmes, he said, you're persistent, but you're too late. I aimed my revolver, my heart racing. Drop the gun, I said to the man in the dark coat. He hesitated, then lowered it, his eyes darting to Salazar. Holmes's gaze was fixed on the crate. What's in the canisters? Documents, weapons? Salazar smiled thinly. Knowledge, Mr. Holmes, power, the kind that reshapes empires. You wouldn't understand. Lestrade stepped forward, his voice shaking. You're under arrest, both of you. For murder, smuggling. A sharp crack cut him off. A gunshot from the cave's entrance. The man in the dark coat lunged, grabbing a canister and bolting into the shadows. Holmes gave chase, but Salazar was faster, tossing a small device into the crate. It sparked and flames erupted, consuming the canisters. Run, Holmes shouted, pulling me back as the fire spread, the cave filling with smoke. We stumbled, out coughing, the Serpent's crew firing from the ship. Caleb's boat was waiting, and we piled in, rowing hard as bullets splashed around us. Back on shore, Holmes's face was grim, his coat singed. We lost the cargo, he said. But we saw Salazar. He's real and he's desperate. Lestrade coughed, his eyes wide. What was that, explosives? Holmes shook his head. A failsafe to destroy evidence. The canisters held something vital. Secrets, perhaps, or chemical agents. Salazar won't stop. At the inn, Holmes spread out his notes, the snake and dagger, compass glinting in the lamplight. We know Salazar's face now, he said. The Serpent will try again. Tomorrow we hunt him on land. The fog pressed against the windows, the bay's silence a warning. Salazar's cold smile haunted me, and the fire in the cave burned in my mind. The serpent's cargo was gone, but its shadow loomed larger, pulling us deeper into its deadly game. Chapter 17. The Spaniard's Safe House. The fog over Blackwater Bay lingered like a curse, its gray tendrils wrapping the morning in a damp, oppressive haze. I woke in our inn room, the air heavy with the smell of salt and smoke, my mind replaying the fiery ambush in the reef's caves, our Salazar's cold smile, the man in the dark coat's escape, and the burning crate of mysterious canisters. Sherlock Holmes stood by the table, his face gaunt but focused, surrounded by his clues: the cipher journal, the captain's log, the snake and dagger compass, and the map now scarred with burn marks. His pipe lay cold, his eyes fixed on a new sketch. A rough outline of Salazar's face drawn from memory. "Watson," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Salazar is wounded but not defeated. The serpent may be gone, but he's still here in Blackwater Bay. He'll need a base, a safe house. We find it, we find him." I pulled on my coat, my hands still trembling from last night's chaos. A safe house? Holmes? He could be anywhere. The man in the dark coat, the gunfire, he's protecting Salazar. How do we track them in this fog? Holmes folded the sketch, his eyes like flint. "Men like Salazar leave trails, Watson, even in fog. The Spanish coins, the foreign tobacco, the whistle, they point to a foreigner's habits. We start with the town's edges where strangers hide. Inspector Lestrade met us at the docks, his face haggard, his coat damp from the mist. The town was a shell, its streets empty, the fear of the serpent driving people indoors. "Holmes," he said, his voice strained. "My men are shaken after last night's fire. We lost the cargo and the serpent slipped away. What's next?" Holmes's gaze swept the fog-choked bay. "Salazar's safe house, Lestrade. He's orchestrating this. From land now. We canvass the outskirts, boarding houses, abandoned warehouses, anywhere a Spaniard might hide. We began at the town's fringes, where crumbling cottages and derelict sheds stood against the cliffs. The fog made every step feel like a plunge into the unknown, muffling our footsteps. Holmes moved like a bloodhound, his eyes scanning for signs, fresh tracks, cigarette butts, anything out of place. At a rundown boarding house, the landlady, a sharp-eyed woman named Mrs. Pike, squinted at us suspiciously. "Seen a Spaniard?" she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "I once stayed here a week ago. Tall, well-dressed, paid in odd coins, kept to himself, smoked foul cigarettes, left 2 days back, but his mate's still about. Gruff fella, always in a dark coat." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "Where did the Spaniard go?" Mrs. Pike shrugged. "Didn't say. But he was always heading to the old warehouse by the cliffs. Said he had business there." Holmes thanked her with a coin and led us toward the cliffs, the fog thicker as we climbed. The warehouse was a sagging ruin, its windows boarded, its walls stained with salt. Holmes paused at the door, his fingers brushing a fresh scratch, a snake and dagger symbol barely visible. "He's been here," he said, his voice low. "Stay sharp." We entered, the air cold and heavy with the smell of mildew and tobacco. The warehouse was a maze of crates and rusted machinery, the fog seeping through broken walls. Holmes lit his lantern, its glow casting eerie shadows. Near a stack of barrels, he found a pile of cigarette butts, foreign like the ones from the docks, and a crumpled note, written in Spanish. Holmes translated quickly. "R. Cargo lost. Meet at cliffs midnight. Silence the witnesses." Lestrade Zy? Face paled. "Witnesses, that's us." Holmes nodded, his face grim. "And Eliza, Tom's sister, Salazar's cleaning house. We need to find his safe house before midnight." We searched deeper, finding a hidden door behind a tarp. It opened to a small room, its walls lined with maps and papers, all marked with the snake and dagger symbol. A table held a half-burned letter, its ink the same strange, glowing kind we'd found before. Holmes read it aloud. "Serpent failed. New delivery planned. R.S. to oversee." "R.S. Salazar," I said, my heart racing. "He's planning another move." Holmes pocketed the letter, his eyes scanning the room. A small safe sat in the corner, its lock complex but worn. He pulled out his tools, working the mechanism with steady hands. The safe clicked open, revealing a single item, a leather pouch containing a dozen small sealed vials, identical to the canisters from the cave. Holmes held one up, its contents glinting faintly. "The cargo," he said. "Not documents, chemicals. Likely a weapon or a compound of strategic value." Lestrade frowned. "Chemicals? For what?" Holmes's lips pressed thin. "Power, Lestrade. The kind that buys influence or destroys enemies. Salazar's network is vast." A sudden noise broke the silence. A creak from above, followed by a soft thud. Holmes doused the lantern, his voice a whisper. "He's here." We crept upstairs, my revolver drawn, the fog swirling through broken windows. A shadow moved near. The rafters, the man in the dark coat, his pistol glinting. Holmes lunged, but the man fired, the bullet grazing my arm. I stumbled, pain flaring as Lestrade tackled him. The man twisted free, bolting through a side door, leaving only a dropped knife, its blade etched with the snake and dagger symbol. Holmes helped me up, his face tight. "You're hurt, Watson." I gritted my teeth, binding the wound with my scarf. "I'll live." He's getting desperate. Back at the inn, Holmes examined the vials, his mind racing. "Salazar's safe house is compromised," he said. "He'll move tonight at the cliffs. We intercept him there before he escapes. With these." Lestrade paced, his voice tense. "A trap again after last night's fire. Holmes, we're outmatched." Holmes's eyes were like steel. "We're not outmatched, Lestrade. We're outthinking them. Tonight we end Salazar's game." As midnight approached, we prepared for the cliffs, the fog thicker than ever, the bay silent except for the crash of waves. My arm throbbed, but the vial's glint and Salazar's cold voice drove me forward. The serpent was gone, but its master was here, and his shadow was closing in. Chapter 18. The Cliffside Confrontation. The fog over Blackwater Bay was a relentless specter, its gray tendrils coiling around the cliffs as midnight approached, swallowing the stars and muffling the crash of waves below. My arm throbbed from the graze of the man in the dark coat's bullet, but the adrenaline of our mission dulled the pain. In our inn room, Sherlock Holmes stood by the table, his face etched with determination, surrounded by his clues: the cipher journal, the snake and dagger, knife, the glowing vials from Salazar's safe house, and the crumpled note ordering a meeting at the cliffs. His pipe was cold, his eyes burning with a focus that seemed to cut through the fog itself. "Watson," he said, his voice low and sharp. "Salazar's network is unraveling. The serpent's cargo is in our hands, but he'll come for it tonight, at the cliffs. We set a trap. Catch him, end this." I checked my revolver, the weight of the vials in my coat pocket a constant reminder of their deadly value. "Holmes," I said, "Salazar's desperate. The man in the dark coat nearly killed us last night. What if they're waiting for us?" Holmes folded the note, his eyes like steel. "Then we outmaneuver them, Watson. Salazar's arrogance is his weakness. He believes he's untouchable. Tonight we prove him wrong." Inspector Lestrade joined us, his face pale but resolute, his coat damp from the fog. The town was a ghost town, its streets silent, the fear of the serpent keeping even the bravest indoors. "Holmes," he said, his voice tense. "My men are stretched thin, guarding the docks. It's just us for this trap. You sure about the cliffs?" Holmes nodded, adjusting his scarf. The note was clear. Midnight, the cliffs. Salazar needs those vials, Lestrade. He'll come, and the man in the dark coat will be with him. We set out into the fog. The path to the cliffs treacherous, slick with mist and loose gravel. My wounded arm ached, but I kept pace, my revolver ready. The cliffs loomed ahead, their edges jagged against the gray haze, the sea roaring below like a restless beast. Holmes led us to a rocky outcrop where we crouched behind a boulder, the fog hiding us from view. "Silence," Holmes whispered, his eyes scanning the darkness. "They'll signal, whistle or light. Minutes ticked by, the fog so thick it felt like a weight. My heart pounded, the memory of gunfire and fire in the caves sharpening my senses. Then a sharp whistle cut the air, the snake and dagger signal. A green light flickered below, near the cliff's edge, moving slowly like a lantern in the fog. Holmes tensed, his hand signaling us to wait. Two figures emerged from the mist. Salazar, tall and cloaked, his face cold and angular, and the man, in the dark coat, his pistol glinting. They stopped near the cliff, Salazar scanning the darkness, his voice low but carrying in the fog. "They have the vials," Salazar said, his Spanish accent sharp. "Holmes is close. Find him." The man, in the dark coat, nodded, lighting a cigarette, its glow briefly showing his scarred face. "They're here," he said, his voice rough. "I can feel it." Holmes stepped out, his voice ringing clear. "You're right, gentlemen. Drop your weapons, Salazar. Your game is over." The man in the dark coat spun, firing, but Holmes ducked, the bullet striking the boulder. I fired back, my shot grazing the man's shoulder. He cursed, stumbling as Lestrade tackled him, pinning him to the ground. Salazar drew a knife, its blade etched with the snake and dagger symbol, and lunged at Holmes. Holmes sidestepped, grabbing Salazar's wrist, twisting until the knife clattered to the rocks. "Who are you working for?" Holmes demanded, his voice like ice. "What are the vials?" Salazar laughed, his eyes wild. "You'll never know, Holmes. The serpent is but one head of the hydra. Cut it off, another grows." Lestrade cuffed the man in the dark coat, who glared silently, blood seeping from his shoulder. I kept my revolver on Salazar, my arm trembling from pain and tension. "The vials," I said. "What's in them?" Salazar's smile faded. "Power, Doctor. The kind that burns cities or buys kings. You've stolen it, but you won't keep." A sudden shout broke the standoff, a woman's voice echoing from the fog. "Tom!" It was Eliza, running toward us, her white dress ghostly in the mist. "Where's my brother?" Salazar's eyes flicked to her, and in that moment he broke free, shoving Holmes and sprinting toward the cliff's edge. Holmes gave chase, but Salazar leapt, vanishing into the fog and the sea below. The waves roared, swallowing any trace of him. Eliza reached us, tears streaming down her face. "I followed you," she sobbed. "I had to know if Tom's alive." Holmes's face was grim. "Your brother's likely gone, Eliza," silenced by Salazar's men. "But we'll keep searching." Lestrade hauled the man in the dark coat to his feet, who spat but said nothing. Back at the inn, Holmes examined the vials, his mind racing. "The man won't talk yet," he said. "But these vials are the key. Chemical agents, perhaps, or a formula for destruction. We need to analyze them." Lestrade paced, his voice tense. "Salazar's gone, Holmes. Drowned maybe. Is it over?" Holmes's eyes were hard. "Not over, Lestrade. Salazar spoke of a hydra, a network. The serpent was one ship, the vials one cargo. There's more out there." As dawn broke, the fog thinned slightly, revealing the bay's dark waters. My arm was bandaged, but the weight of Salazar's words lingered. "Another head grows." The man in the dark coat was in custody, the vials safe, but the serpent's shadow still haunted Blackwater Bay, and I knew we hadn't seen the last of its kind. Chapter 19. The Hydra's Shadow. The fog over Blackwater Bay had thinned by morning, but its gray veil still lingered, casting a pall over the town and the restless sea beyond. I woke in our inn room, my arm stiff from the bullet graze, the chaos of the cliffside confrontation replaying in my mind. Salazar's leap into the waves, the man in the dark coat's capture, and the chilling vials now locked in a strongbox under Holmes' watchful eye. Sherlock Holmes sat at the table, his face drawn but alert, surrounded by his clues, the cipher journal, the snake and dagger knife, the glowing vials, and a new addition, a rough sketch of the man in the dark coat's scarred face. His pipe was lit now, sending curls of smoke into the air, a sign his mind was shifting gears. "Watson," he said, his voice low. "Salazar may be gone, but his words haunt us. A hydra with many heads. The serpent was one, the vials another. The man in the dark coat knows more. We interrogate him today. I adjusted my sling, the weight of Salazar's cryptic warning. Another head grows, settling like a stone in my chest. Holmes, I said, he didn't talk last night. What makes you think he'll break now? Holmes's eyes glinted, sharp as a blade. Silence is a shield, Watson, but every shield has cracks. His loyalty to Salazar, or the Hydra, will falter under pressure. We find his weakness. Inspector Lestrade met us at the town's small jail, a damp stone building near the docks. His face was haggard, but his eyes held a flicker of hope. Holmes, he said, unlocking the door. The prisoner's awake, but he's stubborn. Won't give his name, just glares. The townsfolk are calmer now, thinking Salazar's dead, but I'm not so sure. Holmes nodded, his gaze fixed on the cell ahead. Salazar's fate is uncertain, Lestrade. The sea may have claimed him, or he may have planned his escape. Either way, the Hydra lives. The man in the dark coat sat on a cot in the cell, his shoulder bandaged from my shot, his scarred face set in a scowl. His eyes, dark and cold, tracked us as we entered, but he said nothing. Holmes sat across from him, his presence commanding, despite the bars between them. Your master, Salazar, is gone, Holmes said, his voice calm but cutting. The serpent's cargo is in our hands. Who do you serve now? The man spat on the floor, his voice rough. You know nothing, Holmes. The serpent was a tool. The work goes on. Holmes leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. The Hydra, you mean? How many heads? Who pulls the strings? The man's lips twitched, almost a smile. More than you can cut, detective. Salazar was one. There are others. I gripped my revolver, anger flaring. What's in the vials? Why kill the crews? The man's eyes flicked to me, then back to Holmes. The vials are power. The crews? They were greedy. Weak. They had to go. Holmes pulled the snake and dagger knife from his coat, holding it up. This symbol. What is it? A gang? A nation? The man's face tightened, a crack in his armor. You're digging your grave, Holmes. Let it go. Holmes stood, his voice like ice. I never let go. You'll talk or you'll rot here while your masters abandon you. We left the cell, the man's silence following us like a shadow. Lestrade locked the door, his voice low. He's tough, Holmes. What now? Holmes's face was grim. We analyze the vials. Their contents will tell us what the Hydra wants. And we find Eliza. She's still in danger. We returned to the inn, where Holmes set to work on the vials, using a small chemistry kit he'd brought. He heated one, its contents releasing a faint, acrid smell. Not explosives, he said, his brow furrowed. A compound, complex, possibly biological. A weapon or a tool for coercion. I felt a chill. Biological? Like a plague? Holmes shook his head. Too early to say, Watson, but it's valuable enough to kill for. A knock at the door startled us. It was Eliza, her face pale, her eyes red from crying. Mr. Holmes, she said, clutching a letter. This came for me at the boarding house. It's about Tom. Holmes took the letter, unfolding it carefully. It was written in the same glowing ink marked with the snake and dagger symbol. He read aloud. Your brother lives. Stay silent, or he dies. The Hydra sees all. Eliza sobbed. He's alive? Where is he? Holmes's face was hard. A trap, Eliza, or a lure. The Hydra wants the vials back, and they're using Tom as bait. Where was this delivered? She wiped her eyes. A boy brought it, said a man in a cloak paid him. I didn't see him. Lestrade cursed. Another of Salazar's men? Holmes nodded, pocketing the letter. Or a new head of the Hydra. We need to trace this. Eliza, stay here under guard. We left her with Lestrade's men and headed to the boarding house, questioning the boy who'd delivered the letter. He was young, nervous, but pointed us to a shadowed alley where he'd met the cloaked man. Holmes found a fresh cigarette butt, foreign, like the others, and a faint boot print smaller than the man in the dark coats. A new player, Holmes said, his voice low. The Hydra's reach is long. Back at the inn, Holmes spread out his notes, his mind racing. The vials, Tom's survival, the Hydra's threat. They're connected. The prisoner knows more, but we need leverage. Tomorrow, we push harder. Night fell. The fog returned, thicker than ever. The bay's silence a warning. Eliza's letter. The vial's acrid smell. The prisoner's cold eyes. They all pointed to a larger game. One we were only beginning to understand. The serpent was gone, but the Hydra's shadow loomed, and I felt its eyes on us, waiting for our next move. Chapter 20. The Smuggler's Code. The fog over Blackwater Bay had settled into a persistent gloom, its gray tendrils curling through the morning, dampening the town and casting long shadows across the docks. I woke in our inn room, my arms stiff, but healing. The weight of Eliza's threatening letter. The Hydra sees all. And the glowing vials pressing on my mind. Sherlock Holmes stood by the table, his face sharp with focus, surrounded by his clues. The cipher journal, the snake and dagger, knife, the chemical vials, and the new letter with its ominous warning. His pipe sent faint smoke into the air, a sign his mind was piecing together the Hydra's puzzle. "Watson," he said, his voice low. "The prisoner, the man in the dark coat, holds the key to the Hydra's next move. His silence is deliberate, but the letter to Eliza suggests a code, a smuggler's code binding their network. We break him today, or we risk losing Tom and the truth." I adjusted my sling, the memory of the cliffside confrontation, Salazar's escape, the prisoners, defiance stirring unease. "Holmes," I said, "he's loyal to the Hydra or scared of it. What leverage do we have?" Holmes's eyes glinted, hard as flint. "Fear, Watson. Not of us, but of betrayal. The Hydra thrives on loyalty, but it cuts down the weak. We make him believe his masters have abandoned him." Inspector Lestrade met us at the jail, his face etched with strain, his coat damp from the fog. The town remained quiet, its people cowed by the serpent's legend, though the prisoner's capture had eased some fears. "Holmes," he said, unlocking the cell block. The man said nothing since last night, just sits there smirking. "Got anything new?" Holmes held up the letter to Eliza. "A crack in the Hydra's armor, Lestrade. This letter uses their glowing ink, their symbol. It's a message, but also a mistake. They're desperate to silence Eliza." The man in the dark coat sat in his cell, his shoulder bandaged, his scarred face set in a scowl. His eyes flicked, to us cold and unyielding, but Holmes sat across from him, his presence like a storm gathering. "Your masters sent a letter," Holmes said, sliding it through the bars. "They threaten a girl, Eliza, to keep her quiet. But you're here, locked away. They don't trust you anymore." The man's eyes narrowed, but he didn't touch the letter. "You're grasping, Holmes. I know nothing of letters." Holmes leaned forward, his voice sharp. "You know the smuggler's code, loyalty or death, but the Hydra doesn't reward failure. Salazar's gone, the vials are ours, and you're left to rot. Tell me about the code, or your masters will assume you've talked." The man's jaw tightened, a flicker of doubt in his eyes. "You're clever," he said, his voice rough. "But you're fishing. The Hydra's bigger than you think." Holmes pulled out the snake and dagger knife, turning it in the light. "This symbol binds you, doesn't it? A vow. Who leads the Hydra? Where's Tom?" "Eliza's brother." The man's smirk faded, his fingers twitching. "Tom's alive. For now. But you'll never find him. The code's iron. We don't break." Holmes stood, his voice like ice. "Iron bends when heated. You'll talk, or the Hydra will cut you down as a traitor. Think on that." We left the cell, the man's silence heavy behind us. Lestrade locked the door, his voice low. "He's wavering, Holmes, but he's tough. What's next?" Holmes's face was grim. "The code is their strength, but also their weakness. We need to decode the letter's ink. It's a signal, a command." And we checked the docks again. The Hydra's still active. At the inn, Holmes analyzed the letter's glowing ink, heating it carefully over a flame. The paper revealed hidden text, faint but legible. "Tea at North Cove. Deliver vials or he dies. Midnight." I felt a chill. North Cove? Another trap? Holmes nodded, spreading out the reef map. Likely, but it's also a lead. Tom's alive, and the Hydra wants the vials back. We'll go to the North Cove, but not blindly. We headed to the docks, the fog still thick, the air cold and salty. Holmes searched the North Cove's edge, finding fresh boot prints, small, like the ones from the alley, and a discarded matchbox marked with the snake and dagger symbol. Another agent, he said, pocketing it. The Hydra's network is stretched thin. Back at the inn, Holmes cross-referenced the letter's code with the cipher journal. The smuggler's code is layered, he said. Symbols, ink, signals, like the whistle. The North Cove is a test. They expect us to bring the vials. Lestrade frowned, pacing. So we walk into their trap? Holmes, that's mad. Holmes's eyes were hard. We turn the trap, Lestrade. We bring a decoy, empty. Vials, they reveal Tom's location, we take them. As midnight approached, we prepared for the North Cove, filling spare vials with water to mimic the glowing compound. Eliza insisted on coming, her eyes fierce. Tom's my brother, she said. I'm not staying behind. Holmes relented, but kept her close. The fog was a wall as we reached the cove, its rocky shore slick with seaweed. We hid behind a cluster of rocks, the decoy vials in my coat. A green light flickered across the water, followed by a whistle's sharp note. A figure emerged from the fog, cloaked, but not the man in the dark coat. Smaller, nimbler, with a Spanish accent. The vials, the figure called. Show them. Holmes stepped out, holding the decoys. Where's Tom? The figure laughed, drawing a pistol. You're predictable, Holmes. The Hydra takes what it wants. Before I could react, Eliza screamed, rushing forward. Tom! A shot rang out, grazing her shoulder. Holmes tackled. The figure wrestling the gun free, but the cloaked man slipped into the fog, vanishing with a splash into the cove. Eliza clutched her arm, tears mixing with blood. I saw him, she gasped. Tom, in a boat out there. Holmes's face was grim. They're baiting us, but we know Tom's near. Tomorrow we search the cove's waters. Back at the inn, we bandaged Eliza's wound, her resolve unbroken. The fog pressed against the windows, the Hydra's shadow growing. The smuggler's code was iron, but Holmes was fire, and I knew he'd burn through it to find the truth. Chapter 21. The North Cove. Pursuit. The fog over Blackwater Bay clung to the dawn like a stubborn ghost, its gray swirls softening the cliffs and muffling the restless sea. I woke in our inn room, my arm aching but functional, the chaos of last. Night's failed trap at the North Cove sharp in my mind. Eliza's graze, the cloaked figure's escape, and her glimpse of Tom in a boat. Sherlock Holmes stood by the table, his face taut with focus, surrounded by his clues. The cipher journal, the glowing letter, the snake and dagger matchbox, and the decoy vials, now useless after the Hydra's trick. His pipe sent faint smoke, into the air, his eyes burning with a relentless drive. Watson, he said, his voice low. Tom is alive, held on a boat near the North Cove. The Hydra's desperate, using him to lure us. Today we search the cove's waters and force their hand. I adjusted my sling, the weight of Eliza's pain and the Hydra's taunting letter. The Hydra sees all, pressing on me. Holmes, I said, the cove's a maze of rocks and currents. They know the waters better than we do. What if it's another trap? Holmes folded the letter, his eyes like steel. Then we spring it, Watson. The Hydra's stretched thin, Salazar's. Gone, the prisoners locked up, their cargo lost, they're making mistakes. We find Tom, we find the Hydra's heart. Inspector Lestrade met us at the docks, his face drawn but determined, his coat damp from the fog. The town was still cowed, its people whispering of curses, though the prisoner's silence kept hope alive. Holmes, he said, rubbing his hands. Eliza's resting, but she's insisting on joining us. My men are guarding her, but the cove's a death trap. What's the plan? Holmes's gaze swept the fog-choked bay. We take a boat to the North Cove, Lestrade. Eliza's sighting of Tom gives us a lead. We search for the boat, a small craft, likely hidden among the rocks. Caleb waited with his boat, his hands steady, but his eyes nervous. North Coves. Bad waters, Mr. Holmes, he said. Caves, currents, jagged rocks, I'll get you there, but stay sharp. We set out, the fog a heavy curtain, the water black and cold. Eliza joined us, her shoulder bandaged, her face fierce despite the pain. I saw Tom, she said, her voice steady. I'm not staying behind. Holmes nodded, keeping her close. My revolver felt heavy in my coat, the memory of gunfire sharpening my senses. The North Cove loomed ahead, its rocky shore barely visible, the cave's dark mouths like open wounds in the cliffs. Caleb navigated carefully, threading through jagged rocks, the fog muffling the splash of oars. Holmes scanned the water, his lantern dim to avoid detection. Look for signs, rope marks, fresh scratches, oil slicks. A boat's been here. We drifted near a cluster of rocks, and Eliza pointed, her voice a whisper. There, something's moving. A faint shape bobbed in the fog, a small skiff, tethered to a rock, its hull dark and unmarked. Holmes signaled Caleb to approach, but a sharp whistle cut the air, the snake and dagger signal. A green light flared from the skiff, and a figure stood, cloaked but smaller than Salazar or the prisoner. Stay back, the figure called, their voice accented, Spanish, like Salazar's. They held a lantern, its green glow eerie. The vials or the boy dies, Eliza gasped, leaning forward. Tom? Holmes raised a hand, his voice calm but firm. Show us the boy, no tricks. The figure hesitated, then pulled a bound man from the skiff's floor. Tom. Gagged, his face bruised but alive. Eliza stifled a sob, and I gripped my revolver, my heart racing. The vials, the figure repeated, drawing a pistol. Now. Holmes held up the decoy vials, their water glinting faintly. Release Tom first. The figure laughed, sharp and cold. You think we're fools? Drop the vials in the water or he's dead. Before Holmes could respond, a shot rang out, not from the skiff, but from the shore. The figure flinched, the lantern falling, its green light snuffing out. Tom struggled, and the skiff rocked, the figure cursing in Spanish. Holmes leapt into the water, swimming toward the skiff, his movements swift despite the cold. I fired a warning shot, keeping the figure pinned as Lestrade rowed us closer. The cloaked figure cut Tom's ropes, shoving him into the water, then dove after, vanishing into the fog. Holmes reached Tom, pulling him to our boat. Eliza clung to her brother, tears streaming as Caleb hauled them aboard. Tom coughed, his voice weak. They wanted the vials, said they'd kill me. Hydras everywhere. Holmes's face was grim, his coat dripping. Who was on the skiff, Tom? A name. Tom shook his head, shivering. Didn't know her. Called herself La Víbora. Said Salazar was just the start. Lestrade's eyes widened. Her? A woman? Holmes nodded, scanning the fog. The Hydra's heads are many. La Víbora, the Viper, is another. We rowed back to shore, Tom wrapped in a blanket, Eliza tending to him. At the inn, Holmes examined Tom's wounds, his mind racing. La Víbora's bold, but careless, he said. She left Tom alive, a loose end. The Hydra's fracturing. Lestrade paced, his voice tense. What now? We've got Tom, but the vials are still a threat, and this Viper, she's out there. Holmes spread out his notes, the snake and dagger matchbox glinting. We interrogate the prisoner again. He knows La Víbora. And we analyze the real vials. Their contents will reveal the Hydra's goal. As night fell, the fog thickened. The bay's silence heavy. Tom's rescue was a victory, but La Víbora's cold laugh echoed in my mind. The Hydra's shadow stretched further, its next head waiting to strike. Chapter 22. The Viper's Trail. The fog over Blackwater Bay hung like a heavy shroud, its gray swirls softening the dawn's light and casting an eerie hush over the town. I woke in our inn room, my arm nearly healed, the thrill of Tom's rescue, at the North Cove tempered by the chilling name he'd gasped, La Víbora, the Viper, a new head of the Hydra. Sherlock Holmes stood by the table, his face sharp with focus, surrounded by his clues, the cipher journal, the glowing vials, the snake and dagger matchbox and Tom's tattered jacket, now a grim reminder of his ordeal. His pipe sent faint smoke into the air, his eyes burning with a relentless drive to unmask the Hydra's next move. "Watson," he said, his voice low. "La Vibera's escape proves the Hydra's network is still active. The prisoner, the man in the dark coat, knows her. We break his silence today and we trace her trail." I checked my revolver, the memory of the North Cove's gunfire, and La Vibera's cold laugh tightening my chest. "Holmes," I said, "the prisoner's loyal to the Hydra or terrified. And La Vibera, she's as slippery as Salazar. How do we find her?" Holmes folded Tom's jacket, his eyes like steel. "She left a trace, Watson, her accent, her haste. The prisoner's fear is our leverage. We make him believe La Vibera's betrayed him." Inspector Lestrade met us at the jail, his face weary but resolute, his coat damp from the fog. The town was stirring, Tom's rescue easing some fears, but the Hydra's shadow kept the docks quiet. "Holmes," he said, unlocking the cell block. "Eliza and Tom are safe, guarded at the inn. The prisoner's still silent, but he flinched when I mentioned the cove. Got a plan?" Holmes held up the matchbox, its snake and dagger symbol glinting. "The Viper's name, Lestrade. It's a crack in his armor. We press it." The man in the dark coat sat in his cell, his shoulder healing, his scarred face set in a scowl. His eyes tracked us, cold but wary, a shift from his earlier defiance. Holmes sat across from him, his presence like a blade. "La Vibera," Holmes said, his voice sharp. "She left you to rot, didn't she? Took Tom, set a trap and fled. The Hydra's cut you loose." The man's eyes flickered, a muscle twitching in his jaw. "You're lying," he growled. "She'd never—" Holmes leaned forward, cutting him off. "She did. She's running the operation now with Salazar gone." "Where is she? What's the Hydra's next move?" The man's hands clenched, his voice low. "You don't know what you're up against, Holmes. The Viper's smarter than Salazar. She's untouchable." Holmes pulled out the matchbox, tossing it onto the cot. "Untouchable? She left this at the cove. Careless. Tell me where she's hiding, or you're no use to the Hydra, or us." The man stared at the matchbox, his resolve cracking. "There's a house," he muttered, his voice barely audible. "Old manor east of town by the marshes. She meets her men there, that's all I know." Holmes stood, his face hard. "For your sake, it better be enough." We left the cell, the man's words hanging heavy. Lestrade locked the door, his voice tense. "A manor in the marshes? Sounds like another trap." Holmes nodded, his eyes scanning the fog outside. "Possibly, but it's a lead. We scout it today before La Vibera moves." We headed to the marshes, the fog thicker as we left the town's cobblestones for muddy paths. The air was cold and rank, the ground soft underfoot. The manor loomed ahead, a decaying hulk of stone and ivy, its windows dark, its walls scarred by salt and time. Holmes paused at the gate, finding a fresh cigarette butt, Spanish like the prisoner's, and a faint boot print, small and nimble. "La Vibera's been here," he said, his voice low. "Stay sharp." We entered through a broken window, the manor's interior damp and silent, its floors creaking under our weight. The air smelled of mold and tobacco, and a faint glow came from a room upstairs. Holmes led the way, his lantern dim, his revolver drawn. The room was a makeshift office, its table covered with maps, coded letters, and a single vial, identical to the ones we'd seized. Holmes examined the vial, his brow furrowed. "Another sample," he said. "The Hydra's not done." A soft click sounded behind us, a door easing open. Holmes spun, but a figure darted through the shadows, cloaked and small, their footsteps light. "La Vibera," Holmes hissed, giving chase. We followed, weaving through the manor's halls, but she was fast, slipping out a side door into the fog. Holmes cursed, finding only a dropped scarf, silk, scented with jasmine, marked with the snake and dagger symbol. "She's taunting us," he said, pocketing it, "but she's close." Back at the inn, Holmes spread out the manor's maps, cross-referencing them with the cipher journal. The marshes are a smuggler's haven, he said. La Vibera's using the manor as a hub. The coded letters mention a new shipment, smaller, but vital. Lestrade frowned, pacing. Another shipment? Holmes, we can't keep chasing shadows. What's in the vials? Holmes heated a vial, its contents hissing faintly. A biological agent, Lestrade. Not a plague, but a toxin. Lethal in small doses, perfect for assassination or control. The Hydra's selling power. Eliza joined us, her face pale but fierce. Tom's resting, she said. But he remembered something. A name La Vibera mentioned. Cobra. Another leader? Holmes's eyes hardened. The Hydra's heads multiply. Tomorrow we return to the manor, catch La Vibera, and find this Cobra. As night fell, the fog pressed against the windows, the bay's silence heavy. The viper's scarf, the glowing vial, Tom's whispered name. They all pointed to a deeper web. The Hydra's shadow grew and I felt its coils tightening around us.